The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. And this is from page 180. The subhead is, the title is What We Need to Remember, the chapter title. The subhead is The Slavery, Losing Your Freedom of Civilization. In 1861, Mark Twain rode the railroad and overland stage across much of the United States, documenting his journey in a book, Roughing It, published in 1871. During a stagecoach ride near the Great Salt Lake, he encountered a group of the Shoshone-speaking Native Americans called the Ghost Suite, often referred to then by whites as the Digger Indians. Twain considered them, quote, the wretchedest type of mankind I have ever seen, end quote, and wrote, quote, they produce nothing at all. They have no villages, no gatherings together into strictly defined tribal communities, a people whose only shelter is a rag cast on a bush to keep off a portion of the snow, and yet who inhabit one of the most rocky, wintry, repulsive wastes that our country or any other man can exhibit. The Bushmen and the Gashoots are manifestly descended from the self-same gorilla or kangaroo or Norway rat, whichever animal Adam the Darwinians trace them to, end of quote. Even to this day, many people who have not bothered to study the Shoshone or other hunter-gatherer people imagine them in much of the same way Mark Twain did. Books and movies over the years have implied that their lives must be a continuous wretched struggle to find food from day to day, and that their cultures and religions hardly qualify as either. In that belief, however, Twain and many modern people are wrong. If the highest goal of contemporary civilization is to have leisure time, free from the demands of providing for food and shelter, so that one may then contemplate the great mysteries of life, then the Shoshone had achieved the pinnacle of success. Our culture teaches that civilizations like city-states come about as a result of technological innovations such as agriculture, giving people more free time. With this free time, the story goes, they produce art, literature, religion, and explore the cosmos. Primitive cultures don't have these things because they don't have the time for them. In fact, these represent two of our most deadly myths. Leisure time. Every empirical study of both historic and contemporary cultures finds that the more complex and hierarchical a culture is, the harder the people in it must work and the more frantic their lives are. Just look at how many hours a week the average middle management executive works, about 60, and how many families have two 40-hour-per-week workers devoting 80 hours a week to paying the mortgage and feeding the family. Only a very small class of people within the city-state enjoys the leisure time state of freedom, its economic and political rulers. And because the ruling class is not producing food, those who are food producers must spend extra time making food for those who are not. The Shoshone require the same average 2,000 calories of food energy every day as do any other humans. However, they expend on average only 2 hours a day to acquire it, because they were a nomadic people who moved from place to place following their food supply. As the seasons changed and food became scarce in one place, they simply moved to another. If one food wasn't available, they knew where and how to find another. Toronto University professor Richard Lee found that the similarly structured tribal group, the Kung of the Kalahari Desert in Africa, spent less than 15 hours a week, 2 hours a day, attending to gathering food and the other necessities of life. The rest of the time, he said, they played, told stories, and made music. John Yellen of the National Science Foundation found the same to be true of the Hottentots, another hunter-gatherer group in Africa. The Shoshone had an elaborate and meaningful culture and religion. They generally did not suffer from famines or plagues. They had lived comfortably and happily on their land for at least several thousand, perhaps as many as 10,000 years, keeping the land as clean and pure and productive as it could be in that desert and mountain region, living harmoniously with their neighbors. At the time Mark Twain took his ride through their territory, the Shoshone had accomplished over 1,000 years a second achievement, which is regularly touted by our leaders as the highest goal of humankind. They had eliminated warfare. There was not even a word for war in their language. The Shoshone lived a tribal life in one of the most desolate parts of North America, with a population density that ranged from one person every 50 square miles to one person every 100 square miles. A typical tribal unit was a single extended family of 5 to 20 people, and they traveled at a leisurely pace across a wide area. On those rare occasions when others, including whites, came to attack them, they simply ran away and hid. The occasions for attack were rare, largely because the Shoshone accumulated no wealth. They had no systems for preserving and storing food, minerals, or anything other than what they could carry. In this regard, they were not poor. Their lives were comfortable, their family interactions meaningful and simple. A symbol of this is found in the highest status act a Shoshone could commit in the presence of others, to give them what he had. Generosity is how one achieves social standing among the Shoshone, whereas the accumulation and control of surplus food and possessions were how whites achieved social status. They were called the diggers by whites because they often dug in the ground for roots and food. Whites assumed this implied some sort of agricultural stupidity, but in fact the Shoshone had a deep and rich knowledge of life in their environment, both above and below the ground, and often guided her. Last Hours of Ancient Thought. And justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. And well, there we go. Hello. And Dr. David Dow's lawyer, the fellow who got dragged off the United Airlines flight, held a rather lengthy press conference this morning. It was covered by all the networks. And the story, the plot thickens, as they say, or the story actually, fills out. He was, in fact, a physician. He's 69 years old. He was on his way home because he had patients to see in the morning. His wife is a physician, and she had patients to see the next day. They have 5 children. 4 of them are also physicians. Although, that almost comes across as some sort of classist argument, like, well, why didn't they pick out some guy who just looked like he was homeless and drag him off the plane, right? Really, we all, whether we're doctors or not, should have, should be treated with respect by an airline. And frankly, any company that wants our business, but particularly ones that are participating in what is associated with the commons. You and I pay the taxes that fund the air traffic control system that makes it possible for United Airlines to make a buck. You and I pay through our taxes to build the airports and the runways that make it possible for United Airlines and every other airline to make a buck. And let's keep in mind, this is not, in my opinion, I fly a lot. I have in just 2 airline frequent flyer programs, over 3.5 million lifetime miles, plus God only knows what elsewhere. I used to fly. Louise and I used to own a travel agency. And boy, have things changed since 83, 86, when Louise and I owned Spurbury Travel. And and the airline industry actually worked really hard to make their customers happy, because there was actually competition. There were dozens of airlines. There's lots of competition. But what happened, this guy, when Saigon fell in 1974-75, he was on a boat. He fled South Vietnam, fleeing the communists who wanted to kill him. And he told his lawyer, this was more terrifying than that. And he told his lawyer he has no recollection of running back onto the plane and saying, just kill me, just kill me. He apparently, well, it could be that he had a PTSD episode, or it could be that his injuries were so severe that his brain wasn't working right. He suffered a concussion A concussion means that your brain is bruised. Concussions are really serious stuff, especially for somebody 69 years old. He also suffered a broken nose, broken sinus bones. He's going to have facial reconstructive surgery. He lost 2 teeth. You got 3 goons who beat the crap out of this guy. I mean, there's just no other way to put it. This is police violence, condoned and supported by both the city of Chicago and by an airline. Police violence as a dimension of a business plan. There's something just fundamentally wrong with that. Extraordinarily fundamentally wrong with it. There was an interesting piece published over at curiosity.com about empathy. You know, the people who run the airlines tend to be multimillionaires, certainly millionaires. I think Oscar, the guy who runs United, I think he makes $50 million a year. I could be wrong. I've seen that in a couple of news stories, but it might just be somebody throwing a number out. But I guarantee you, the guy's doing well. Thank you very much. And wherever he came from, he was doing well. The CEO class takes care of themselves. They take care of their own. And it's not just the CEO class. It's just this whole upper management thing. People in upper management in American business, by and large, you know, 30, 40 years ago, before Reagan changed corporate culture in America by changing the laws that had to do with corporate executive compensation. Used to be you couldn't compensate executives with stock. And so people literally, I mean, when Reagan came into office in 1980, the average time that the average CEO had been with the company that he was the CEO of, or in the rare she, was 30 years. And a typical CEO had been with their company 30 years, and most of them had literally worked their way up from the bottom. That is no longer the case. It used to be that the CEO had a series of constituencies to whom the CEO answered. There was the local community. There were the employees. There were the stockholders. There was the company itself as an institution. And, well, I guess that's pretty much it. What am I missing? The product, I suppose. You could say, you know, an obligation to produce a good product. So those were the goals. And Reagan said, well, it wasn't just Reagan. I mean, it was a whole bunch of billionaires around Reagan who said, you know, we want CEOs. You know, we're the stockholding class, right? The vast majority of stock in the United States is owned by a very small number of very wealthy people. Yes, we have a lot of people who own stock in the United States because of 401ks and IRAs and things that Reagan started in order to destroy pensions and pave the way for the destruction of Social Security. But the fact of the matter is, most stock is actually owned by a small number of very wealthy people. And basically what they said during the Reagan era was, we want the CEOs of these companies in which we own stock to start looking out for us first. We want these CEOs to say, to hell with the local community. It doesn't matter if we're gassing people downwind with our coal-fired power plant. To hell with the local community. To hell with the customers. If we can sell them cheaper crap and make more profit for our stockholders, we'll do that. To hell with our employees. We'll steal their pensions. We'll do away with their unions. We'll cut their wages. This is what the stockholders wanted the CEOs to say. To hell with the institution of the company itself. The company can simply be, you know, broken up or sold off. It can be acquired by somebody else. We don't want our CEOs to have loyalty to the institution of the company, and to hell with the, you know, with the company. Well, I guess I've kind of summarized the whole thing. And so by changing the rules of compensation so that CEOs could be paid with stock, then, you know, hey, if most of your money is coming from stock, then you've got an incentive to jack up the value of that stock, right? You get paid with stock. Say the stock right now is selling at $30 a share, and you get a million shares, vested to you. That doesn't mean you're getting, $30 million in stock. That doesn't happen until you take the stock and sell the stock. So you wait until, you do something, right? Lay a bunch of people off, make the factory dirtier, whatever.
make more profit, pack more people on the airplanes, make more profit. Once you've made more profit, the stock goes from $30 to $35. Then you exercise your option and sell it, and you make $5 profit on every single share you made. It's total short-term thinking. And that has come to completely dominate American business. Now, who thinks like this? People who lack empathy. And I'm not talking the old, oh, it's sociopaths. It goes beyond that. This is this remarkable article in Curiosity.com. It's titled, "The Rich Are Less Empathetic Than the Poor, According to Research." And this is a study that was done by Arizona State University neuroscientist Marco Varnum. It was published in peer-reviewed journal, Culture and Brain. And basically what he found, and he was doing all kinds of, EEGs and all kinds of studies and things, to find out how people perceive their own social class, and then how they react to people in distress. And the higher people were in the income category, in the social class category, in the income category, the less empathetic they were. Now, there's actually an evolutionary reason for this, although the reason would be it would be kind of flipping upside down what I just said, which would be that the lower somebody is on the socioeconomic scale, the more empathetic they are. And the evolutionary reason for that, the evolutionary reason why people at the bottom of the social or economic ladder, or people who have come from the bottom of the social and economic ladder, like, for example, a Vietnamese refugee like Dr. Dow, might be more empathetic than somebody who was born in a silver spoon in their mouth and ends up as a CEO, is because the impact, the actions of people around them have greater impact on them. They're more likely to be the victims, basically, of the wealthy and powerful. And so empathy is a way of kind of calibrating your environment. What's going on around me? What do I need to know? How do I need to interact and react with this and with these people and that sort of thing? So I think that, these business changes that Reaganomics brought us have created a change in our business culture. And now we've got this self-reinforcing loop where the CEO and management class has become its own thing. And you basically have to, go to the best schools and get your MBA from Wharton and that kind of thing. And of course, that means you came from a wealthy family by and large. And it means that those are the goals you're setting yourself, is to be at the top of the social class. And so then we have this lack of empathy in our business culture. And the net result of that is that all of us get treated like crap by our vendors, whether it's your internet service provider, whether it's your phone company, whether it's your bank, whether it's your local supermarket, whether it's your airline. We need a fundamental change in how this stuff is happening. And by the way, this has totally infested and infected the Republican Party. We've got this Republican congressman who held a town hall the other day and said, "Bull crap, you don't pay my salary." Say what? I want to get into that in just a minute. So I've got that rant for you, and then I'll pick up your calls, your thoughts on all of this stuff. And plus, we've got a lot of other interesting news throughout the day. Will Donald Trump destroy Obamacare? He actually has the means to do it. We'll see. He thinks he's going to use it as a negotiating tool with Democrats. Really? Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
20 minutes past the hour. We'll be back, or coming up on 20 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Let's see here. Ray in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Hey, Ray, thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Listen, I'm a school teacher. That's the only reason why I'm calling on a weekday like this. But I just want to bring to you and to everybody's attention that they're going to try and repeal Obamacare again. And it's very interesting because the highest peak on the Dow Jones was at the beginning of March when they couldn't pass it through, and it's been steadily going down, the stock market.
Yeah.
People need to understand this has nothing to do with health insurance. In order for them to give their tax cuts, they need to take it away from the
Obamacare.
Act.
Yeah, there's $300 billion worth of taxes on wealthy people and corporations that support Obamacare.
I just want to call out to people out there who still want to believe this con man. And I'm from New York, so I'm speaking in shorthand here. This man's a shyster. I want to reach out to these people out there who still may be holding on to this. This is simply a mode of business. You lie. Here, this is the best example. I'm interested in buying something that you have, and the first thing I do is say, "Oh, it sucks. It's out of condition." So why are you so intent on putting down something I may want to sell to you? Because I want to lower the price. I want to get it at the lowest price possible. It's the oldest New York trick out there. Oh, Obamacare is no good. It's failing. Because they have to set it up before they kill it.
Yep. Yeah, it's a con job. And Don the Con is really good at this. And, I don't disagree. Well said, Ray. Thanks a lot for the call. Michael in Los Angeles. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I just have a quick question. Donald Trump was talking about, China can no longer manipulate their currency, this, that, and the third, and now he's saying things along the lines of China isn't manipulating their currency. What does he mean by that? And what did he mean by, the dollar is stronger now than it's ever been? I just don't really follow the language.
For the last 20 years or so, China had been artificially holding low the value of the yuan, of their currency, the renminbi. And in the last 2 years, they've actually not been doing that. In fact, the last year, they have been trying to strengthen the yuan, their currency. So Trump's, he had this line on the stump speech, as China is a currency manipulator. That was true a couple of years ago, but it's actually not true right now. Now, China has benefited tremendously from past currency manipulation. With regard to the dollar being too high, I don't know where Trump was going with this thing, but the dollar has been quite strong lately, in large part because money from all over the world has been coming into the United States. There's demand for U.S. treasuries. There's demand for, U.S., investments in the U.S. stock market. We're seen as a stable country. And what that does is it increases the cost of exports and reduces the cost of imports, which hurts our balance of trade deficit. So, so if Trump can reduce the value of the dollar, which is exactly what he was accusing China of doing, by the way, if he can reduce the value of the dollar, that means that our exports get cheaper and our imports become more expensive. And, so there's more incentive for companies in the United States to build things in the United States. I don't know if that's where he's going or if that's what he had in mind or not. It's pretty hard to read this guy's mind. Michael, thanks for the call.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here
on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you
24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Thom Hartmann here with you. So
what, you know, in your mind, what, first of all, have you had an experience with an airline recently that has informed you, well, you know, that you would like to share, that you want to tell us about? Number one. Number two, what do you think would be an appropriate solution for this? I understand that there's, at law, a $1,300 cap on the amount of compensation airlines can offer. They only offered $800 in this case, and it's always highly conditional. You can only use it on certain flights, and you can only, you know, and you've got to have this coupon, and sometimes some of the airlines, you actually have to take it to the airport to turn it in and stuff like that. I mean, I've gotten these coupons before and been unable to use them. So, A, do away with the $1,300 cap. B, let them offer actual cash. I mean, there's a bunch of things. So there's that. And then we got Representative Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma. Representative Mullen told his constituents at a town hall this week that they don't pay his salary. In fact, we've got the clip of it. Chris, can you play that? Okay, here's the clip of it. It's just somebody's YouTube video, his town hall.
One, you said you paid for me to do this. Bull crap, I paid for myself. I paid enough taxes before I ever got there and continue to through my company to pay my own salary. This is a service. No one here pays me to go. I do it as an honor, as a service.
But that salary,
guys, I'm just saying. Don't. This is a service for me, not a career. And I thank God this isn't how I make a living.
Give up your $178,000 in.
I have before. I've actually paid it back.
Every year would be great.
But here's. I'm going to address.
Yeah. So you guys don't pay my salary. So tip of the hat to Troy. We looked it up. Who does pay his salary? Well, it turns out the oil and gas industry gave Mark Wayne Mullen, congressman, Republican congressman from wherever he is, Oklahoma. Here we go. The oil and gas industry gave him $190,850. Billionaires through leadership PACs gave him $94,000. Casino and gambling interests gave him $64,000. Health professionals gave him $63,000. Pharmaceutical industry gave him $55,000. The electric utilities gave him $55,000. The insurance industry gave him $52,000. The automotive industry gave him $50,000, $49,800. The real estate industry gave him $48,000. Retail sales gave him $45,000. Telecom service gave him $39,000. And on it goes. And then the top contributors, Devon Energy was his number one contributor. His number two contributor, Blue Cross Blue Shield. His number three, Honeywell Strategy. Number four, Love's Travel Stops. Number five, Pelco Structural. Number six, AT&T. Number seven, American Crystal Sugar. Tied for number seven, Boeing. Chesapeake Energy, Cox Enterprises, Home Depot, Koch Industries. So, yeah, I guess we don't pay your salary, Congressman McWayne Mullen. But it's pretty disgusting that you're bragging about that. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with you with your stories of airlines right after this. And welcome to Thom Hartmann University. Our It's Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. This is toward the very end, and it's a chapter titled Transforming Culture Through Politics. Many think it's just to fund tax cuts and subsidies for the rich, that the multimillionaire CEOs who've taken over almost all senior posts in government are just pigs at the trough. And this is a spectacular but ordinary form of self-serving corruption. It all seems so plausible, and there's even a grain of truth to it. But juicy deals for right-wing government insiders and their friends are just a byproduct of the real and deeper war against democracy. The neoconservatives are perfectly happy for us to think that they're just opportunists skirting the edges of legality and morality. But this is far more dangerous than simple government corruption. Indeed, the neoconservatives claim to be anti-government. As a leading spokesman for the neocon agenda, Grover Norquist told National Public Radio's Mara Eliason
in a May 25th, 2001 Morning Edition interview, quote, "I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I can drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub," end quote. Without a larger view, the issues of domestic spending, oil, neoconservative power plays in both major parties, the loss of liberties, anti-government rhetoric, and war in the Middle East all seem like separate and unconnected events. They're not. The new conservatives who've seized the Republican Party and who, through the Democratic Leadership Council, are nipping at the heels of the Democratic Party are not our parents' conservatives. Historic conservatives like Barry Goldwater, Harry Truman, and Dwight Eisenhower would be appalled, although their philosophical roots go back to Alexander Hamilton, who openly argued during the Constitutional Convention that royalty was the best form of government. The neocons have always been kept to the fringe. Indeed, the Reagan-Bush revolution flew in the face of traditional conservative ideals. As John Stockwell notes in his book, The Praetorian Guard, the U.S. Role in the New World Order, Reagan and Bush were proud of their contempt for their concerns of environmentalists, with Reagan once saying, "If you've seen one redwood, you've seen them all." Their Department of the Interior under James Watt sold off minerals and forests to campaign contributors at fire sale prices, and their EPA in many cases moved from prosecuting corporate polluters to legitimizing and protecting them under the guise of regulation. Although James Madison wrote in 1792 that an important role of government was to promote a strong middle class, quote, "by the silent operation of the laws, which, without violating the rights of property, reduce extreme wealth toward a state of mediocrity and raise extreme indigence toward a state of comfort," end of quote from James Madison. That was not a sentiment shared by those in the Reagan-Bush revolution. Instead, Reagan raised taxes on the middle class and working people while cutting taxes by more than 60% for the most wealthy in America. At the same time, he bragged that he'd eliminated more than 1,000 programs for poor people, and even proposed that poor school children should be content with ketchup as their daily vegetable. At the same time, the Reagan-Bush administration and later the George W. Bush administration worked hard to roll back the very individual liberties that America's founders had fought and died for. Dwight Eisenhower left office warning Americans about the dangers of the concentration of power resulting from corporations getting into bed with the military. But the Reagan-Bush and W. Bush administrations openly embraced these corporate powers, inviting them into the halls of governance and hungrily sucking at the teat of their campaign contributions. In the past, those promoting what is now called the New Conservative Agenda went by different names. The founders of America knew that for 6,000 years, civilized human beings had been ruled by one of three groups: kings, theocrats, or feudal lords. Kings held power by virtue of the threat of violence and continual warfare. Theocrats and popes held power by the people's fear of a god or gods, and feudal lords by wealth and the power that comes from throwing average people into poverty. The new idea of our founders in 1776 was to throw off all three of these historic tyrannies and replace them with a fourth way: the people being ruled by themselves, a government that derived its legitimacy and continuing existence solely from the approval of its citizens. Government of, by, and for we the people. They called it a constitutional Republican democracy. What we are seeing now in the conservative agenda is nothing less than an attempt to overthrow Republican democracy and replace it with a worldwide feudal state. The last time this happened, the feudalists took over a monarchy in North America. In December 1600, Queen Elizabeth I chartered the East India Company, ultimately leading to a corporate takeover of the Americas for the colonists that ended with the Boston Tea Party and 3 years later, the American Revolution. The corporate state partnership of the East India Company in the UK went on to conquer India, but eventually disintegrated as the British Empire faded and the British government, along with most of Western Europe, embraced somewhat more Jeffersonian forms of democracy. Conservatism raised its head again in the 20th century, revived by Franco, Hitler, and Mussolini. The Italian dictator even used the word corporatism to describe it, and then later renamed it as fascism, a word defined by the American Heritage Dictionary as, quote, a system of government that exercises a dictatorship of the extreme right, typically through the merging of state and business leadership together with belligerent nationalism. The book is The Left. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. So we have politicians
I mean, you go back to the Gillens-Page study that was published by, I think it was Princeton University about 2 years ago, where they looked at the probability of the desires of particular economic classes of people in the United States, their desires being translated into legislation that actually passes Congress and gets signed by the president. And what they found was that for the top roughly 10%, there was a fairly high correlation between what people wanted and what got turned into legislation. For the top 1%, very high correlation. You're in the top 1%, odds are really high. What you want is what gets passed as law. But what the bottom 90% want, that's equivalent to random noise statistically. In other words, the vast majority of us, the bottom 90% of us, are politically completely ignored, which, in my opinion, is why somebody like Donald Trump can come along and say, I'm not a politician. I'm not part of that system. That system is rigged. That system is trying to screw you. Vote for me and I'll change it. And a lot of people said, okay. Now, he's not keeping his promises. He's become the system that he was decrying. He always was the system that he was decrying. I mean, it was just cheap talk. The guy's a huckster. His favorite book is P.T. Barnum's The Art of Making Money. No, I'm not making that up. But so we've got, you know, a Republican Party that doesn't care about us. We've got business that doesn't care about us. We've got airlines that don't care. You know, it's like something's got to change. And it seems to me that a lot of the what has to change, it goes back to rolling back the radical changes in how businesses are run and compensated and regulated that changed during the Reagan administration. And tragically, we've got an administration now that wants to do the exact opposite. They want to deregulate industry even more. Anyhow, Fran in Los Angeles. Hey, Fran, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hey, you know, one of the things that keeps coming up with this that strikes me about the United incident, no one's questioning the fact, why did the police just show up and basically act as the airline's bouncer in what amounts to a civil or business dispute? What law was the guy breaking that
None.
the police were coming in to address? I mean, is that what we pay police for?
Right.
Is to be...
Well, these guys were special. This was an aviation police force that was created by the airport in Chicago. They are apparently employees of the city of Chicago. And I'm guessing that Dr. Dow's lawyer is seriously considering suing the city as well as the airline. But,
the thing is, I knew there had to be, look, there's because of our mania over terrorism and all that, we've given up a lot of, you know, personal freedoms. And it's like, okay, that happened in Europe when I lived there in the 80s. You know, you understand that to a point.
Yeah.
But the fact that the policeman is saying, okay, well, what's going on here? It's like, well, wait a minute. They should know the law. It's like, okay, you already allowed him to board. Is he causing a disturbance? No. You know what? You need to find a nonviolent, non-confrontational way of resolving this.
Yeah.
And I'm going to stay here to protect the passenger as well as your interests.
Absolutely, absolutely. This, this physician and his wife were, represented no threat to public health or safety, and really that should, the police should not be bouncers for an airline. I totally agree with you, Fran. That's a very, very good way of saying it. Thanks a lot for the call, Terry in Chicago. Hey, Terry, what's up?
Terry in California.
Oh, are you in California?
Yeah,
cool.
outside of Los Angeles. No,
okay.
I'm not a Chicagan.
It says here you're listening on WCPT.
The
maybe.
Airlines incident.
Yeah.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
Stand corrected. I'm in Ventura, California. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. When you said the other day that you haven't had a car in years, I was so pleased to hear that. If I didn't have to have a car, I wouldn't have a car either. My issues, particularly since I started reading the works of James Howard Kunstler, excellent author, I'm interested in the issues of transportation and city abandonment, okay? Great source for these issues is a publication called City Lab, okay? But my issues, I would need to make a list of my issues with the airlines. First of all, it's rude, it's unfriendly, it's hostile. My issues, I'm a utility cyclist. I go to work on the bike. I look at the freeways. My issue: just sit back and watch the average American motorist. I don't think it's strictly that we're it's not that we're Americans, but it's what our forms of transportation do to our psyches. Watch them. Just sit back and watch them. The lane switching. Watch it from a perspective of what must they be thinking?
Yeah.
They are suicidal. And my point, right now, the Republicans, the skinny budget has all forms of transportation under attack.
Yep.
These 10th Amendment people believe that our gas taxes can only go into asphalt. They are attacking mass transit. They are attacking Amtrak. And by the way, I just joined NARP because it's relaxing instead of stressful.
Good.
I love my Amtrak long-distance service.
There you go. Me too, Terry. Me too. Terry, thanks for the call. Excellent points all. Paul in Round Mountain, California. Hey, Paul, what's up?
Hey, hi, Tom. So I'm calling in reference to a couple articles regarding the DNC that says that they're not interested in progressive candidates. One's in the Observer. The headline is the DNC and the CCC confirm they won't support progressive candidates.
I would say that's an exaggeration, but they did not support the guy, Thompson, I think his name was, who was running in Kansas, who only lost by roughly 6.5, 7 points in an election that when not Scott Pruitt, was that Mike Pompeo, he became the CIA director. This is Pompeo's old seat, and he typically won that seat by 30 points. So, you know, our revolution was supporting him. The Bernie-crats were supporting him. But the DNC, in the last day, they made 25,000 get-out-the-vote calls. So at the very last minute, they kind of threw something in. But you know, the DNC needs to have a 50-state strategy. With regard to whether a candidate is progressive or not, that's really up to the local Democratic Party or the Democratic Party at the highest level at that you know, it would be state party if we're talking the Senate. You know, if the congressional district, if we're talking the House, if we're talking state House or state Senate, then, you know, there would be that local district. And those local parties, the precinct committee people, I keep making this point on this program, the precinct committee people get together and they decide who's allowed to run in the primary. And so, you know, what back in 2008, when you know, the Koch brothers kind of dusted off the Tea Party that was created by Big Tobacco back in the 1980s and reinvented it as an anti-democratic party movement, essentially, as something that they could use to take over the Republican Party. Well, I'm off on a tangent here, but the bottom line here is that the DNC really does need to be doing a 50-state strategy, every state, and challenging these folks. And you know, I'm totally down with that, Paul. And they're not doing it. And you know, hopefully that's going to change. Paul, thanks for the call. Scott in Gurnee, Illinois. Hey, Scott, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how you doing? Great show.
Thank you.
Listen, I just wanted to comment about that gentleman who got beaten up on the plane the other day.
Yeah.
That police force, well, they're not a police force. They're a security force. You have the TSA guys who work at O'Hare. I have access to, I'm in an industry that requires me to have access to some of the secured parts of the airport. So I deal with these guys daily. And the guys you saw were employees of Chicago. They're a security force, not a police force. They cannot arrest you. They don't carry weapons. They have mace, and I think some of them have tasers.
Right.
And if you saw the video, you saw some of them not even in any type of uniform. They had jeans on. These guys are thugs with questionable backgrounds, no doubt about it. I deal with these guys all the time. And what you saw is who these people are.
Yeah.
They are thugs.
Yeah, no, this is police brutality, but it's police brutality that you know, at the behest of corporate culture.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. They are there for one reason alone. Now, I know there's a question about them being able to go on that airplane, and I know that his lawyer is now questioning that because they are supposed to, as far as I know, to my knowledge, are to secure parts of the airport, such as the roads and the access roads, and that's it. I don't think they have a right to go on to what would be United's property. They're going to have a problem there.
Well, I would guess United would have the right and probably the need to call them if, for example, they had a drunk or unruly passenger, or somebody who was creating a scene, or somebody who was being abusive to other passengers. It would not be. It would be entirely appropriate to have, not to have a flight attendant deal with a situation like that.
Possible where you'd have a situation like that, but you're absolutely right. These guys are they're like hired thugs. That's what they are.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, and it's unfortunate. And thank you, Scott, for the call. It's unfortunate in particular in that it is a reflection of how corporate culture over the last 30 years or so, since we started this, let's worship the rich, let's move all the money up to the top 1%. Let's do away with the American middle class. Last year was the last year since the 1940s that the middle class was the fastest growing and largest segment of society. It no longer is. The rich and the poor combined are bigger than the middle class now. Amazing.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
This is all a result of the changes in corporate culture that came about as a result of this Ayn Rand libertarian ideology. And welcome back. Dee in Bellevue, Washington. Hey, Dee, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Sure, just fine.
Oh, great. Basically, your segue was exactly what I was about to say. This is what happened on United Airlines is what's going to happen throughout America based on the fact this is corporation. It's not about people. It's about profit. They didn't have enough employees that they had to bring employees. Not enough. They didn't want to hire, train employees that they had to bump people from their seats to fill a need in another state. So basically it was about money, saving money at the expense of the consumer. And we, the people, let me put it this way, Trump was not elected by the majority of people. He does not have a mandate. He was elected by the Electoral College. So we, the people, still have the power to make changes. But if you want corporations running business, then get used to this type of new America, where consumers will not have a right. When you go shopping, you will see a sign in front of the grocery store that says "Shop at your own risk." Yeah. Because if government doesn't monitor the food quality, then if I'm a business, which I do have a business, and my goal is profit, then I could take so many cuts that will put the consumer at risk. And as you, as a consumer, worshiping business assumes that risk. So beware the buyer. You have no rights. You are marching down that Hunger Game kind of concept. Yeah, and every now and then something gets passed that gives us a little bit of rights, like the creation of the Consumer Protection Bureau and the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, the CFPB, which has already recovered something like $20-30 billion that has been stolen from average working people by big banks, and they work on our behalf. And what's one of the number one missions of the Republican Party right now is to destroy the CFPB by undoing Dodd-Frank, because Dodd-Frank created it. And why? Because it protects people rather than banksters. And God forbid anybody protect the people. That's called regulation, and we can't have regulation. And Dee, I think you nailed it. And it's there used to be the equivalent with it's called the Civil Aeronautic Board, the CAB, and they had a division that dealt with complaints from customers, and that was done away with in 1978 when we deregulated the airlines. And frankly, I think we should bring it back.
I used to travel a lot back in the 70s, and air travel was pretty good. And it's yeah. So Dee, I think you nailed it. I think you nailed it. Thank you very much for the call. It's great to hear from you. This is corporate culture. This is the absolute logical and predictable result of the Reaganomics changes to the way that we regulate business in America. So that as we deregulate business, business becomes progressively more and more brutal to the point where they have to start enforcing their own rules with brutal people, like these 3 cops who beat the crap out of this guy on this airplane. We'll be right back. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Bob in Belgrade, Montana. Excuse me. Hey, Bob, what's up?
Well, good morning, Tom. I really, really, really enjoy your show, as always.
Thank you, Bob. What's up?
I'm just calling to inform our Montana listeners that Donald Trump Jr. is coming to Montana for a Greg Gianforte rally. I think it's this weekend. Yeah, Friday and Saturday. He's coming to Kalispell, Hamilton, Billings, and Bozeman.
Have they discovered an endangered species in Montana that he wants to shoot?
Well, no. It's mainly to try to get stronger support for Gianforte and President Trump's agenda.
Oh, that's
now Gianforte is running against Rob Quist, who is a progressive Democrat, and personally, I feel from reading the letters to the editor in the Daily Chronicle of Bozeman that Rob Quist has a maybe 50-50 or better chance of winning this election coming up on May 25th. And they're going to be mailing out absentee ballots around the 1st of May. And if Quist wins this election, he'll be the first Democrat to hold Montana's House seat in 2 decades.
Yeah.
And from the paper, it says there's been rumors that national Democrats, such as Bernie Sanders, may come to Montana to stump for Quist. However, the campaign documents show that the campaign shows that it hasn't been decided yet, it hasn't been confirmed whether they're going to get any of the national Democrats to come. But anyway, it looks to me like it's probably going to be a major event with Trump Jr. because Montana is a red state, and of course they love everything Trump here in the state of Montana.
Bizarre.
However, there is a good portion in and around Billings and Bozeman. Not sure about Kalispell or Hamilton, but in our area there's a fairly strong blue streak to our area, I guess you'd say, rather than red.
Yeah.
So my main thing was I just wanted to make sure that people in Montana know about this, if they can attend any of these rallies and hold up quiz signs or.
Cool. Okay, you've done it, Bob. Thank you very much. Well said. Steve in Langley, Washington. Hey, Steve, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Thank you for taking my call. I wanted to run an idea by you. I heard it was to expand Medicare for anyone that's 26 and under, and the intention of that was to have people get off of employee-sponsored health care so that they could get jobs that they wanted rather than just getting a job that would give them insurance.
Right.
And also getting them on Medicare would lower the health care costs for people in general.
Yeah, why not do it for everybody in America, Steve?
Yeah, I want to do it for everyone in America. I often hear, in defense of incrementalism, let's start by lowering the age of Medicare. But I'd love to see it for people, up to the age of 26. Because oftentimes young couples trying to have kids, it might be like a financial decision not to because they literally can't afford to, or they have jobs that they don't have insurance.
Well, the Medicare administration. I mean, if we were to tomorrow pass legislation that like HR 676 that just gives everybody in America access to Medicare, and it would take a while for Medicare to ramp up to the point where they could deal with that many people. Which is one of the reasons why people have suggested, like dropping the age 10 years every decade. But you could also start at 0 and raise the age 10 years every decade, or something, or something in between, or like you said, start with 0 to 26 and then, do it in other pieces. Now that said, as Medicare ramps up, some of the big insurance companies are going to start ramping down. They're going to change their policies to be more like European policies are. European insurance companies basically just cater to wealthy people. And so they won't need anywhere near as many claims adjusters. But those people, you're still going to need somebody doing something like that. And so those people simply go to work for Medicare. And so, there will be a transition period there. We'll see. Steve, I got to move along, but thank you. It's a great idea. Melissa in Madison, Wisconsin. Melissa, we got a minute to the break. It's yours.
I just found it funny. The Mar-a-Lago Hotel, their kitchen had 13 health code violations.
Yeah, and this was the week before President, what's his name from, not G, the guy from Japan.
And there's this sound bite where he's talking about this beautiful chocolate cake that he's feeding to President G, and all I'm thinking is rat droppings.
Oh, my, yeah. Yeah, it's that's a story that didn't get much play at all. I saw it yesterday for the first time that and maybe somebody finally got the paperwork out or leaked it or whatever, but that Mar-a-Lago had
having consumer protections, in the one place you'd think you'd want to have.
Yeah, and in fact, it was they had their freezers or some of their coolers weren't working properly. And this was 3 days before Abe came, and if they were making sushi and it wasn't being refrigerated, that could be actually dangerous. So, Melissa, thank you for the call. Although I don't know if, what came out of Mar-a-Lago was dangerous at all. It might have just been, hey, you got some coolers that aren't working. Anyhow, we'll be right back. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by EcoWine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, EcoWine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and I am just super pleased that we have on the line with us Lucian K. Truscott IV, a journalist, author, contributor with Salon.com, who wrote an absolute, and you can tweet him at Lucian, L-U-C-I-A-N-K, Truscott, T-R-U-S-C-O-T-T. Brilliant article over at Salon titled 59 Tomahawks and 5,900 Years of Slaughter, A Brief History of Syria. Lucian, first of all, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for being with us and for writing this incredible article. I'd almost like to just turn this over to you. What is the story of Syria that Americans don't know or understand that is so important for us to know?
Well, I guess, the general story is they've been killing each other over there for 5,900 years, pretty much without let up. But when I say killing each other, I mean all the people from that region killing each other, all the other people from the region, and then stopping killing each other only long enough to expel various invaders like Alexander the Great and the Crusaders and the Romans and the Byzantines and people like that. But other than when they weren't going to war against invaders and running them out, they were going to war against each other. And I guess that the thing that made me want to write that article was, of course, the 59 Tomahawk missiles landing on essentially an empty airfield in the middle of Syria, got everybody's attention. And I started thinking back to when I was over there back in 2003. And I was up in northern Iraq in the area that has been controlled by ISIS and in and around Mosul and Qaria and then over all the way over to the Syrian border and up to the Turkish border. And all of that land up there is the people that live there, the Kurds and the Turkmen and the Sunnis and the Shia and the Yazidis, and they're all descendants of the people that have been there since time began. And the interesting thing about that region of the world is we actually know what they were up to because they took the time to invent things like languages. Doing pictographs on stone walls. And what did they draw on the stone walls? Well, they drew pictures of battles because that's what they were doing. And, they recorded, like any good English teacher will tell you, write what you know.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they did. They wrote what they knew, and what they knew was going to war with each other.
Yeah, you start the article out with a story. One chilly morning as the sun rose over the sands of Nineveh Governorate, the brigade commander sent a Spec 4 to my bunk with the news that we'd be flying into town for a big meeting with all the sheikhs in the region. What did you learn from that?
Well, we went to this meeting down in Korea, which is this town on the Tigris River. It's another ancient town. And it sits on an oil field with 800 million barrels of oil right under this town. And so there's all that wealth there in the ground, and then all these sheikhs from these different tribes around there met in this town hall down there one morning, and I flew over there with the brigade commander and General Petraeus, who was the commander of the 101st Airborne Division, which controlled that area at that time, was there, basically to listen to a gripe session by these sheikhs. And there were about 100 of them there, and they represented all these different tribes just in that area, just in the area south of Mosul and over into the Kurdish region, and then to the west in the Sunni areas. And I didn't have any idea what was going on there, except none of these guys were very happy with General Petraeus, and he was up on the dais with four Arab guys from the area, and this young Iraqi guy spied me and signaled me to come over and sit next to him. And it turned out he was a student at a college over in Kirkuk, and he spoke English. And he was sitting there cackling to himself and just laughing. And I asked him what he was laughing about, and he started telling me what was going on there. He said, you know, he pointed out each one of these sheikhs that got up, like, this guy hates that guy, and that guy, you know, 6 years ago, that guy's sister got killed by the other guy's cousin, and they hate each other, and so they've murdered 6 or 8 people in each other's tribes, and now they've got a truce going on, but they hate each other. And then another guy would get up and he'd say, well, he hates the other guy over there, and the guy behind him, he's an ally. He was explaining this whole thing to me, but it was like a Rubik's Cube.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there were all these different things there, and it made absolutely no sense except to that young guy.
Yeah.
And he made enough sense of it out for me that I could actually sort of understand what was going on. And what happened was Petraeus was trying to calm them down, and he'd been basically paying off the sheikhs for 6 months with money that he had gotten from Uday and Qusay, the Saddam sons. When they killed them, they got $6 or $7 million bucks. So he'd been spreading money around up there and basically keeping the peace. And but now the money had run out, so these guys were upset. And this one old sheikh stood up with this long gray beard, and everybody got quiet. And my friend there whispered to me, "This guy's a really big, mocker, big sheikh." And he got up there and he started in on Petraeus and saying, "What are you doing here?" He says, "Nothing works." He says, up in Mosul, that we don't have real police anymore because they were all in the Ba'ath Party. So now we got these pretend police. We don't have anybody running the electrical system because they were all in the Ba'ath Party and they fired them. So now we got these guys that don't know anything, so there's no electricity. The water system isn't working because Ba'ath Party guys were in charge of the waterworks and you fired them. So now we got a bunch of guys in there walking around, holding their ass with one hand and a cigarette with the other. And nothing is working. And he finally got to the point where he said, "What are you, crazy?" He said, "You come in here and you conquer us, and what you're supposed to do is co-opt the system and take over and order people around and get things done. And you're not doing it. Well, what's the matter with you? Don't you know how to be conquerors?"
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I realized these guys came from this culture that went back 6,000 years, where over and over and over and over again, that various tribes would conquer other tribes, and before that, these towns would go to war with each other and conquer the Ur would go to war with Babylon, and Babylon went to war with the town that's now Aleppo, and then Aleppo would overrun Babylon, and then both of them would get together and overrun Damascus, and they're just going to war with each other. And what they would do when they overran the places was,
well, when they did, they created governance. I mean, there's kind of a sub-story here, and that is the libertarians in the Bush administration, and Don Rumsfeld was one of them, believed there have been all these attempts to prove that libertarian ideology, economic and political ideology, actually works. The first major attempt was propping up Pinochet, with the Chicago boys, Milton Friedman going down there and helping him out and all that kind of stuff back in the 60s. That turned out disastrous. The second major attempt was when the Soviet Union broke up, and they went in, and the Chicago boys went in and advised them, privatize everything as rapidly as you can, shock therapy, and that produced a lot of oligarchs. And so, and that, in other words, that was not a successful experiment. So Rumsfeld is saying, hey, if we do away with the government, the private sector will magically fill that space. This is Ayn Rand 101. And, democracy's messy, but it'll work. And it didn't work.
Madness. It was total madness. Remember the first thing that they did in Baghdad when Bremer moved in there was he got a bunch of 28-year-olds out of business schools, and they set up a goddamn stock exchange.
Yeah.
The water didn't run. The electricity wasn't on. The sewers were backing up, and they set up a stock exchange.
Yeah.
I mean, it was insanity.
Yeah.
And that's what these guys up there in Mosul were saying. What do you think you're doing? And I mean, the greater point of the thing is, way down near the end of the article, I was pointing out that Assad, who's a descendant of all these killers, murderers, thieves, and enslavers, that go back 6,000 years, Assad's just doing what what everybody else has done for 6,000 years. And I said, but what they're not doing is they're not running political campaigns. They're not taking out TV ads. You know, they're not going on shows like The Apprentice or Survivor or Diners, Dives, and Drive-Ins. They're taking guns and shooting each other. The way that not just disputes have been settled over there, but the way, the entire way that they've run that region of the world, going back as far as we know history goes, in recorded history, which is 6,000 years. They've either used rocks and sticks and stones and swords and spears and bow and arrows, or nowadays they use AK-47s and RPGs.
Yeah. And we've inserted ourselves in the middle of this craziness. It's amazing. Lucian K. Trescott IV, I strongly recommend you read this article over at salon.com. It is absolutely brilliant. Lucian, thanks so much for being with us today.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Great speaking. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back. John Hope Bryant is going to drop by and say hi, and then we'll be picking up your phone calls. And I've got, as I've mentioned a few times, a whole bunch more news to share with you. And welcome back. McWayne in Chino Valley, Arizona. Hey, McWayne, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Well, I just wanted to take exception to you using my name in vain regarding the arrogance of Mark Wayne of Oklahoma.
Oh, but his name is Mark Wayne. But it's all run together as one word, M-A-R-K-W-A-Y-N-E.
Yeah, in deference to minus McWayne. So
oh, okay. Well,
close but no cigar.
My
I
apologies.
also wanted to give my wife an attaboy. Senator Flake here in Arizona has been hesitant to hold a town hall, so she started a petition on Facebook, got some 5,000 signatures, and now he's agreed to have one. So
wow, amazing.
Very, very much so.
Well,
okay, thanks, dude.
You're welcome. Good on you guys. Thank you, McWayne. Wayne, from McWayne to Wayne in Charleston, West Virginia, watching Free Speech TV. Hey, Wayne, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Quick question. I got a town hall coming up next week.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you still had that list of the representatives that got paid for selling our
I'm
property.
pretty sure I do. Hang on just a second. Let me just think I stuck it in my... Yeah, I've got it right here in my hand. What do you need to know?
Shelley Moore Capito.
Okay, say last name starts with what letter?
Capito.
Was it with a C? Okay, C-A...
I think it's C-A-P-I-T.
Yeah, that is that person a Democrat?
No.
She's a Republican. I don't see her on the list. Maybe it's Moore Capito.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Let me.
Did we have Democrats that took money too?
Yeah, no, there were absolutely no Democrats who took this money. Actually, no Democrats who voted this way. I mean, I'm sure some of them took money, but I'm not seeing her name on here, unless I've got it wrong. With the M. Mitchell, Paul Mitchell, Kathy McMorris Rogers, John Molinar.
No, this is Shelley Moore Capito.
Alexander Mooney.
They usually pronounce it wrong in Washington, but
it goes right to Mark Wayne Mullen, the guy that I was talking about earlier. He took $47,000, but is she a senator? Oh, yeah. Interesting. Okay, hang on just a second. Let me get to the Senate list. I'm very sorry. I was looking at the wrong list. I was looking at members of the House.
Hey, not a problem.
Let's see here. The first part is senators, and I don't see her name here under the M's. Let me see if it's under the C's.
No, it'd be C.
Yeah, Capito, Shelley Capito.
Yep.
Capito. She took $24,675.
That's what I need to know.
$24,675. So.
No, that's sad that people have to sell your privacy for pittance.
Yeah.
30 pieces of gold.
Yeah. Well, in this case, 27,000 pieces of gold, but.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I absolutely do. And in fact, given the price of gold, it's actually probably not 27,000. It's probably more like 27. So in fact, it might even be 30. Wouldn't that be ironic? Well, good luck, Wayne. Let us know how the town hall works out, okay?
Okay.
All right, good talking with you. Thanks a lot for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here
on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you
24 hours a day,
every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us,
raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
And welcome back. On the line with me is John Hope Bryant. John is the chairman and CEO of Operation Hope, the nation's first nonprofit financial services network for underserved communities, and the Hope Global Forum, and the author of How the Poor Can Save Capitalism. The website is operationhope.org, and you can tweet him at Operation Hope or at John Hope Bryant, Bryant. John, welcome to the program.
Honored to be with you. With much respect for what you do.
Thank you for joining us and for the great work that you're doing. So tell us about Operation Hope. What are you all doing, and what do other people need to know about this to replicate it, to support it, to whatever should be done?
Well, we're really finishing the work, the unfinished work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. of 1968 with the Poor People's Campaign, along with Ambassador Andrew Young, who's our global spokesman, my mentor and play father. And then before that, 100 years before that, you had Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass with the unfinished work of the Freedmen's Bank, which nobody knows about. It's been lost to history for the most part. But Abraham Lincoln, after the Emancipation Proclamation, after the Civil War, signed the Freedmen's Bureau Act on March 3rd, 1865, to, quote, teach freed slaves about money, end quote. This was after what we call 40 acres and a mule. And his mission was to bring us into the free enterprise system. And to make a long story short, Lincoln was killed the next month. It was 3 of the most progressive months of public policy in America's history. It was 400,000 acres in January, a mule in February, a bank to teach former slaves about free enterprise, to finance the land and finance the crop. In March, he's assassinated in April. And Frederick Douglass went on to run the bank, who, unfortunately, America believes is just an abolitionist, who's really a very successful businessman, who invested the equivalent of $20 million today in that bank and ran it. And when it failed, it was said the failure of that bank did more to set freed slaves in America back than 10 more years of slavery. Now, you fast forward to 68, here's Dr. King trying to basically get us back to zero. He didn't give his life to create a generation of builders or homeowners or entrepreneurs or GDP creators or job creators. No, he just tried to get the whites only signs down, and that was the result of Abraham Lincoln getting assassinated and Reconstruction ending. So my theory is this. It's not like we got the memo on free enterprise and capitalism. This is my next book. It's not like we got the memo on free enterprise and capitalism and screwed it up. We just never got the memo. And Dr. King was trying to deliver that memo as a preacher. I mean, he still was trying when he launched the Poor People's Campaign, and that was, Tom, about all people and not about black people. It is a mistake to assume Dr. King was a black leader. He said, I'm here to redeem the soul of America from the triple evils of war, racism, and poverty. And because of him, America, then the world over, assumed that America was the land of the free. And then he launched this movement of poor whites. There's more poor whites in America than anybody else, blacks, Latinos, Asians, Indians, and others. And then he's assassinated the same month of Lincoln, April, 100 years later. So we've taken it all upon ourselves to get that legacy alive and well. So we got the Treasury Department to rename the Treasury Annex building the Freedmen's Bank building last year. That's across from the White House, where the location of the Freedmen's Bank stood. And now we're opening 1,000 locations across this country. I have orders for 435 today, called Hope Inside. Hope Inside of bank branches, grocery stores, big box retailers, houses of faith, government offices, places where people flock, stop, and shop to raise credit scores 120 points to 700. Because nothing's going to change your life more than God or love today than moving your credit score 120 points.
There you go. Okay, it's OperationHope.org. John Hope Bryant. He's also the author of How the Poor Can Save Capitalism. John, you're doing great work, and please give my very best to Andrew Young.
I will. God bless you.
Thank you, sir. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back in just a moment. Hi, it's the Thom Hartmann Book Club with the Thom Hartmann University, and today we're reading from Threshold, the Progressive Plan to Pull America Back from the Brink. I'm reading from the preface. This is page XIII. The world right now is tottering atop three major thresholds. An environment that is so afire that it may soon no longer be able to support human life. An economic free market system that is almost entirely owned, run, and milked by a tiny fraction of 1% of us and has crashed and in many ways is burning around us. And an explosion of human flesh on the planet that has turned our species into a global petri dish just waiting for an effective agent to run amok. 4 mistakes have brought us to this point, and the failure to recognize them at their deepest level will only push us faster toward total tipping points, where we are thrown over the 3 thresholds and into disaster. All 4 of these mistakes are grounded in our culture, our way of thinking, our way of seeing the world, the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and why we're here. The first mistake is a belief that we're separate from nature. Our religions tell us that we were created by a supernatural being who is not part of this earth and not from this planet. He set us apart from all other life, and many among us, perhaps even the majority of the 6 billion of us, roughly 7 billion now, don't even believe that we are animals, but instead think we're a totally unique life form. The second mistake is a belief that an abstraction, an economic system, is divine and separate from us. This mythical so-called free market, so we believe, operates under its own divine rules and is entirely and eternally self-regulating. It is always right. The fact that worldwide it's more than 95% owned and run by fewer than 0.0000001% of us, it's just the way things are, always were, and always will be. We are here to serve the economy, this belief goes. It's not here to serve us. The third mistake is a belief that men should run the world and that women are their property. While it may seem that women's rights are well advanced and society is nearly egalitarian in the developed world, the United States, Western Europe, and Australia combined are only about 1/4 of the population of the world. In India, it's still a common rural practice for men to burn their wives to death simply because it's more convenient than divorce. In many Arab countries and across much of Africa and South America, it's not uncommon for women to be murdered by their families if they dishonor the family by not going along with an arranged marriage or not being a virgin at time of marriage. Even in the first world, women are routinely excluded from positions of power in the world's largest institutions, such as the Catholic Church. This is one of our biggest mistakes, not just because it's morally deficient or because it can be biologically challenged, but because its primary result is an explosion in population. The fourth mistake is a belief that the best way to influence people is through fear rather than through the power of love, compassion, or support. We stand baffled when Palestinians in Gaza vote for a political party that has a long history of terrorist activity, somehow completely overlooking the fact that that same group has been feeding people, building schools and hospitals, and providing old age and widow pensions to people in need. We think we can threaten and bomb people into liking us and behaving in ways consistent with our best interests while ignoring their own best interests. We have come to believe that we are not our brother's keeper, that we are separate from all other humanity on the planet, and in all that, we are mistaken. Civilizations have come and gone, and those long gone vanished mostly because they despoiled their commons, allowed small elites to control their economies and governments, and lived in ways that were unsustainable. Those who survive for centuries or millennia are the ones that learned how to protect their commons, engage in non-toxic commerce and governance, and organize their cultures and lifestyles in ways that could continue in the same place and the same way down through the ages. If we don't learn the lessons of the latter, we shall face the fate of the former. And just a little bit from the first chapter. This is titled Darfur, and on the border with Darfur, Sudan, March 16th, 2008. It's late morning, and I'm sitting on the dirt ground typing it into an old AA battery-operated pocket word processor, a Zorus ZR5000, in part because the nearest electricity is over 500 miles away. So is the nearest paved road and the nearest building made with anything other than mud or grass. This is Gok Machar, southern Sudan, just a few miles from the border with Darfur, a village that's swelled from 8,000 people to more than 45,000 as refugees flee the bombings and murders take place as I type these words just 50 miles to the northwest. About 300 people arrived just this morning, most with nothing more than the clothes they were wearing, many with stories of relatives who died along the way as they fled or before the UN could transport them here. When we first arrived on the African continent, we looked out onto the nighttime savannah beyond our Nairobi hotel, and it was truly a startling sight, one I'd almost forgotten since my last visit to Kenya back in 1982. The landscape is huge, horizon to horizon, like the movies you see of these parts of Africa. The land here in South Sudan is just as vast and flat. The 45,000 people around me share one single hand-pumped well, drilled a decade ago by the UN, and no other infrastructure beyond that. No buildings, no roads, no septic tank or sewer system, no schools, no clinics, no hospitals, no stores, or even storehouses. Nothing. The book is Threshold, the progressive plan to pull America back from the brink. Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights. All the important stories we cover and the issues we care about are at HartmannReport.com. Members of our community can comment and join the conversation. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. A couple of other things in the news. The United States has just dropped the, they call it the Moab, the mother of all bombs. It's officially known as the GBU-43. It's 11 tons. That would be, what, 22,000, roughly, pounds of explosive. And it's never been used in battle before. General John Nicholson, the commander of U.S. forces in Afghanistan, this is according to CBS News, was required to get permission to use the weapon, but how far up the chain he had to go, I don't know. One can imagine, Donald Trump sitting around with his generals going, we have a really big bomb. I mean, a really big bomb. I mean, as big as my fingers, right? A really big bomb. As big as the tie that I'm wearing. A giant bomb. I want just a long and big and makes a lot of noise and it really goes boom, right? They go, well, yeah, sir, we do. We've got this huge bomb. We've never used it before, but it's, it's a monster. It's the biggest non-nuclear bomb, that America's ever made. Oh, yeah, well, let's drop that thing. In all probability, there's actually probably some sort of reasonable strategic reason to use this bomb in this place. But why are we still there? Why are we, this was the conversation that we had just a few minutes ago with Lucian Truscott. This is a part of the world that really we have no business being in. And, oh, boy, we've got a giant bomb. Okay, last thing, and then I'm going to pick up your phone calls here. Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, just introduced legislation on Thursday. I didn't realize that prime ministers could introduce legislation, but apparently they can in Canada, because here's the story. This is by Ian Austin in today's New York Times. Fulfilling a campaign pledge, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau introduced legislation on Thursday, today, to legalize the recreational use of marijuana all across Canada. So how long before Jefferson Beauregard's Sessions III begins talking about building a northern border wall, right? It's like, oh, my God, we got to keep the potheads out. Remember, he used to like the Klan until he discovered some of them smoked pot? Anyhow. Nick in Yorkville, Illinois. Hey, Nick, what's on your mind today?
Oh, Tom, hey, 2 quick points. One, I just want to reiterate to all your listeners that your program is above and beyond. It's informative and it's excellent.
Thank you.
I'd scrolled over to one of the RWNJ stations, and these people were talking about how to game the system. They had an expert on there on how to get yourself in a better position to get bumped from an airplane so you can get the $1,350. And I was just like, come, these people, they talk on both sides of their mouth.
Right.
Second point, and I love your mantra of don't bash somebody if they're not there to defend themselves. So I'm not going to bash your guest yesterday, Charles Sauer.
Okay.
But yeah, there's a big but there. Part of my heart aches when you have this guy on because I feel like you spend 15 minutes arguing moot points. He was arguing with you that airplanes are not transportation.
Right. No, he was arguing that form of transportation, because it's more expensive, and so it's not literally available to everybody at all times, like walking out onto a public street. Is therefore not part of the commons. And I'm like, it depends on how we define the commons. But if we're paying for the air traffic control system and we're building the airports and we're doing this because we believe that this is a public good, that it's going to facilitate, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and business, by the way. If we're doing this, then it is the commons, and it should be appropriately regulated. And that was my argument. And his argument was the libertarian argument that, well, actually what we should do is we should say it's not at all the commons. We should privatize air traffic control. And the Republicans have introduced legislation to do that into Congress right now. And every airport should be, built and owned by the airlines rather than, which I doubt the airlines would like. It's like the football stadium owners. They don't want to build their own stadiums. They want to shove that off on the taxpayers. But so that was the argument was what is the commons, Nick, essentially.
Oh, yeah. Well, and you're right. And but it's sometimes it pulls at some of my gray matter up inside my skull. It some of the stuff that comes out of his mouth and how he justifies it.
Yeah. That's my goal, is to get you thinking and give you stuff to push back on other libertarians. So
absolutely, and I definitely that's the one I will say, the one caveat, the benefit of having those counterpoints on is it gives us a chance to hear that. So thank you, Tom.
You're welcome, Nick. Thanks a lot for the call and for your kind words. Michael in Bronx, New York. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Hey, Tom, good buddy. That last quote just reminded me of the other topic I wanted to discuss with you. But first, with the filibuster, given how conniving Mitch McConnell is, all right, we all saw the stunt that he pulled after he denied Merrick Garner, then President Obama's nominee, a single hearing. They wanted to ram Gorsuch through the process, and they did that in less than 2 months, which turned around and pretty much contradicts the argument that there's not enough time to consider Gardner's nomination, which was well over 9 months.
Right.
But then, he knocks out the filibuster. And what I'm afraid of, assuming in 2018 or as much as 2020, the Democrats will regain full control of the Senate again, maybe even of Congress. But I know it's like a 2-month span between the election and the actual inauguration or the new Congress convening. I cannot put it past Mr. McConnell to, as one of his last acts as Senate Majority Leader, to want to reinstate the filibuster and make it that much more difficult for the majority side to really get things done because of how much of an obstructionist he is, let alone a big talking turtle liar. Now, if I can also add comments regarding the what happened to that poor United Airlines passenger and all the others. All right, first off, I heard that the airline wasn't really overbooked. And if that's the case, that's even more troubling.
Right.
But before I went to college, I used to be a commuting express bus driver before they came up with the CDL license, and again before I went to college. We had a counter for our express buses. It's a total of 53 seats. And for each passenger that gets on, we, press the clicker and keep note of how many people are on.
Right.
So when there's a maximum amount of seats, before the next passenger boards, we tell them that, sorry, there are no more seats available. You're welcome to stand if you wish to ride on. We give them that option. But, the thing is, it's about common courtesy and respect for the passengers because they're the ones that are paying the fare. And I got so upset the other day. I don't know if it was on your show or on another radio show I was listening to while at work. And there was a person who said to be a cop or a retired cop, and he was being very passive about the airlines and saying, well, it's United Airlines, it's their airlines. I mean, how would you like it if someone got into your own personal vehicle, sat inside, and you asked them to leave and they didn't leave?
Oh, that's a nonsense story. That's more like, that's like more like, what if somebody offered to give you, what if you took $800 from somebody to drive them across town, and then once they got in the car, you said, okay, get out of the car. I'm going to keep your money. Yeah, good point. Michael, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Helen in Ithaca, New York. Hey, Helen, what's up?
Hi, good afternoon. I wanted to check with you for my congressman. I did find by calling his office that he did vote against our privacy, and I asked them for how much, and they didn't know that.
Let me get my paper out here. I keep putting this, in my file. And what was it? What's your congressman's name?
Tom Reed. That's R-E-E-D. R-E-E-D.
Okay, hang on just a second here. Reed. Thomas Reed. New York's 23rd. He took $31,500.
$31,500. Okay, now I got it. Thank you.
Okay.
And I want to say something that's really serious. It's very sad. Asa Hutchinson, the governor of Arkansas, he's starting his expedited execution thing on Easter Monday, the day after Easter. He's doing his first, and he's trying to kill 8 people within a 10-day period because the anxiolytic drug, this is the first drug of the 3-drug cocktail, it has an expiration date on it. So he's got to get all these people dead. And I've called their office before, and I actually am putting in the mail today. I'm sending him, the number for his office, you want it, 501-682-2345.
Okay.
And I'm sending Amnesty International, his office info too. And I'm sending him a sympathy card, and I haven't put the words together yet, but it's something like, I'm expressing my sympathy and condolences to you because you might...
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
Because you got 5 seconds.
Oh, okay. So I'm sending him a sympathy card because he's going to hurt after what he does.
Yeah, he's gonna burn. Helen, thank you. And welcome back. Charles in Southgate, California. Hey, Charles, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Tom, I appreciate you taking my call. I was getting a chuckle out of that. I go by the stores and they got signs out for candidates, and I ask the people, no, we don't mess with that. We don't do that. But anyway, I was out getting a weed eater part, and I walked by one of these doctors that will give you a medical marijuana card here in California.
Mm-hmm.
And I went in there and I said, well, what do you think about Jeff Sessions? And they were going, who's Jeff Sessions?
Uh-oh.
They don't even know who he is.
Oh, boy.
And so they said, and then right down the street, there was a place where you could go in and get the pot. I went in there and I said, what do you think about Jeff Sessions? They said, who's Jeff Sessions?
Yeah. Well, these are people who might be using a little too much of their own product. Who knows? But Charles, great story. Thanks a lot for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. Robert in Casper, Wyoming. Hey, Robert, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Good talking to you. We've talked before. I think last time we talked about guns. So anyway, this crazy right winger out here. But anyway, Tom, what I wanted to talk about today is the hypocrisy of my own party with dropping that 21,000-pound bomb on in Afghanistan, and yet we condemn Assad. And I'm kind of questioning if he did it or not, because according to our intelligence, we all remember the weapons of mass destruction, and we got ourselves into a quagmire in Iraq. And it really upsets me, Tom, because, I mean, I'm no pacifist. We've talked before. But I don't believe in being a hypocrite either. I mean, Assad's probably a no-good guy, but and so since we don't like him, we're going to kill him, just like we blew the back of Diem's head off in 1963, I believe.
Yeah, and that worked out so well. And just like it worked out so well, killing Gaddafi and killing Saddam Hussein.
Of course, we all remember the Gulf of Tonkin, which never happened.
Right.
And and it's this constant hypocrisy. And I'll be honest with you, Tom, I voted for Mr. Trump with the idea we were going to stay out of Syria. But if we look back at history, you and I both remember a couple of old goats like us, Tom, that, we remember we will not send American boys to fight Asian boys' battles 10,000 miles from home.
Right.
That worked out real well, too,
with
58,000 to 60,000 dead. So, and then I called up my congresswoman, Liz Cheney, and you talk to people there, and I said, well, what's the statement here? How does she? Well, she hasn't made a statement. Well, we just bombed an independent nation, whether you like the guy or not. I mean, he's no dream. But on the other hand, Tom, where was the declaration of war? And I like to know what Congress is doing besides collecting money every day.
I agree. And, the simple answer is they're still operating under that authorization to use force from 9/11. And which is crazy. I mean, bin Laden's dead. We really need to have a congressional declaration of war if we're going to have a war. Robert, thank you for the call. And frankly, I don't think we should have a war. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. Our report is brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Ellen Ratner's new book, Loving What You Do, I'm pretty sure is the title of it. Victoria Jones with us. Hey, Victoria.
Hello, how are you? I'm in the basement of the White House. I just came from the briefing with Sean Spicer, the spokesman. Yes,
I understand that Trump discovered that we have a bomb that's as big as his fingers. It's the biggest bomb ever. It's as big as his long ties. We got to use this big bomb.
Well, yes, and so the United States did. In Afghanistan, on a series of tunnels and caves that ISIS was apparently using. And Sean Spicer said that they took all precautions to avoid civilian casualties. And the Pentagon is also saying the same thing. Adam Stump is a Pentagon spokesman saying the same thing, saying that it was the first ever combat use of the bomb. It's the GBU-43, which I think you were saying the same thing, contains 11 tons of explosives. The Air Force calling it the Massive Ordnance Air Blast Bomb, called the mother of all bombs. and it is a cave complex. Now, they are saying that the White House was saying, Spicer was saying that the idea was they wanted to stop them having some operational space, and so they did that. So, of course, it's very early. We will wait to see what the fallout, if you like, is from all of this, whether there were or were not civilian casualties, what the ISIS casualties were, and what success they had with the tunnels and caves and all this kind of thing. So it's very early days. But, of course, this does, as you said, come after the attack on the Syrian airbase in which they utilized 59 cruise missiles.
Right. Yeah. I think you probably heard, I just had a call from a Republican who said, I voted for Trump because he was going to keep us out of these wars. What's going on here?
Well, it is interesting, and I was going to tweet about this, that he has just used force once and has seen an effect of it, and now he's used it again.
Yeah, his poll numbers went up 15 points. He's loving it. He's discovered something that the American people like, apparently, which is killing people.
I'm not sure that is it that the American people like, or is it the show of force?
Well, it's obviously the latter. I was being sarcastic.
Yeah, and he likes the commander-in-chief role, and I think that I think he feels that it may be doing him some good, and and also they made the decision after the Yemen debacle to put some of these decisions back onto the generals. So I don't know whether all of these, this decision, I presume, went through Trump, but I don't know whether this decision went up to him or whether this was a decision made at the general level.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know.
We'll find out. As you said, it's still very early.
Yes,
so what else is going on in the world?
Well, Representative Raul Grijalva of Arizona is joining the Center for Biological Diversity in a call for an environmental analysis and is suing the government over the border wall. So the idea is it would require the government to undertake a comprehensive environmental impact analysis before beginning construction of a 30-foot wall on the U.S.-Mexico border. But by doing that, it could slow the whole thing down.
Great.
That is exactly what the Center for Biological Diversity is saying. The lawsuit invokes the National Environmental Policy Act, which requires environmental review of major federal programs. And they say that the people in the United States have the right to know what the damage is going to be. The Center for Biological Diversity points out that the existing border fence has caused significant environmental damage, citing a 2008 heavy thunderstorm that produced a damaging flash flood in Arizona after the border fence prevented water from flowing away naturally, and they've got various other things to cite. So that's one thing that's going on.
Okay.
Democratic Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey is considering an interesting approach to prevent President Trump from undermining Obamacare, as she would see it, that worked against the travel ban, using Trump's words against him. Trump said he would let the Affordable Care Act explode after Republicans failed to pass their repeal in Congress, and told the Wall Street Journal yesterday that he might withhold billions of dollars of payments to force Democrats to negotiate. So what Democratic attorney generals are saying is, okay, then let's use those words against them and say that he's willing to sabotage it and blow it up. And they haven't decided on this, but she says it suggests he's out there not just hoping that it fails, but working to see it fail. Connecticut, California, and D.C. told Reuters they're closely monitoring the administration for any signs it's undermining the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah. Well, they already have. I mean, this renewal period, they canceled the advertising to get people into the program. That happened, the first week that Trump was in office.
But they think that they can use Trump's words. That's what they think is going to be
that's a very interesting strategy.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. What else is up?
Former President George W. Bush is defending foreign aid spending as a moral and security imperative in the face of massive cuts by President Trump being proposed to the State Department and UN agency budgets. Bush was speaking to NPR today. He said, when you have an entire generation of people being wiped out and the free world turns its back, it provides a convenient opportunity for people to spread extremism. I believe in this case that it's in our national security interest as well as in our moral interest to continue funding this program. And he's talking in particular about the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Release, PEPFAR. And he was talking about going to a maternity ward in Namibia and things like that. So that's what he's been up to.
Okay.
Senator Bernie Sanders is calling on Democrats to launch a massive 50-state effort to take back the federal government.
Yeah, and state houses too.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the DNC should have been helping this guy in Kansas, Thompson.
Yes. That's right.
He lost by 5 points. I mean, that was,
Thompson, yes.
you know, and his opponent only spent $150,000. I mean, of course, there was probably a lot of, outside money being spent on his opponent's side. But yeah, I'm with Bernie on this.
Yes.
Okay, Victoria Jones with Talk Media News. Thank you, Victoria. It's always great to hear from you.
Thank you very much.
Yep, good talking with you. We'll be back. Professor Sophia McLennan is going to drop by. And, is satire saving our nation? Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club, and today we're reading from ADD Success Stories, a guide for fulfillment to fulfillment for families with attention deficit disorder. And it's really individuals as well. And most of this, the book is well over 100 individual stories about ways that people have learned how to be successful in life and just sharing them with others. A lot of these came from when I ran the ADD forum on CompuServe, and a lot of these are, other people's stories from CompuServe, some of them from when Louise was coaching, when we were running the community for ADHD kids, all kinds of stuff. So anyhow, this is from chapter 5, page 47, titled Learning How to Handle Criticism and Self-Criticism. And it opens with a quote from Benjamin Disraeli in 1860. He said, "It's much easier to be critical than to be correct." One of the most common and recurring strategies of successful hunters, that's people with ADD,
tell about is how they've learned to handle criticism. A successful ADD entrepreneur tells the story of how devastated he was in a high school presentation that he'd spent the better part of 2 months on for English class. He read dozens of books, dug out arcane facts, sifted through quotes and stories and information, all to find what he thought was the absolutely perfect summary to make his point. With great enthusiasm, he pulled an all-nighter, writing the final paper, and marched off to school the next day with his head high and the smell of academic victory in his nostrils. At 2 o'clock, he walked into his English classroom and marched up to the teacher's desk, a paper in his hand. "Here it is," he said, and handed it to her with a dramatic flourish. She took one glance at it, leaned over the side of the desk, and dropped it into the wastebasket. "You didn't double spaces," she said. "When are you going to learn to read the directions?" Stunned, he began to protest, to tell her about the hours of work he'd done. She shook her head as if shaking his words out of her ears and interrupted him, saying, "You have to learn how to do things right. This will be a good lesson for you. I'm giving you an F for that paper, and there's no appeal because today was the last day you could hand it in." He went home that night and at the ripe old age of 14 cried himself to sleep. "I learned 2 important lessons from that experience," he told me 20 years later. The first was that I needed to slow down to force myself to read directions. In that regard, it was probably a positive experience. But it also almost destroyed my commitment to her, to the class, to the school, and to any future academic achievement. And that was where I learned my second and most important lesson. When you fall down, stand back up, dust yourself off, and carry on. That sounds easy, I said, but how do you do it? How do you go from being angry about her, from blaming her, or for that matter, from blaming yourself? "I have a picture in my mind," he said, "of a man who's walking down a dusty rural road. He trips on a stone and falls face first into the dirt. Then he reaches over to the side of the road, grabs a stick, and begins to beat himself over the head with a stick, yelling at himself about how stupid he was to trip and fall. Between these comments, he's cursing the stone for being there and blaming it for tripping him. That's absurd, isn't it? But that's just what many people do. And when I imagine that picture and I see how absurd it is to wallow in self-blame, I feel empowered to get on with my life." End of quote. Unfortunately, the absurd behavior that this entrepreneur described is just what so many people do, particularly those who've spent their lives feeling like they've never quite lived up to their potential. They respond to criticism first by blaming the critic and then by beating themselves up. They rationalize the former by taking a debating position, finding flaws in the criticism or the critic, and then rationalize the latter by telling themselves that if they beat themselves up emotionally, they'll learn from the experience. In real life, it rarely works that way. People who pursue this strategy instead just end up bruised and ineffectual, paralyzed by fear of criticism or by the damage they do to themselves in the name of lesson learning. So how can we best handle criticism? And then we go through some more stories. The first step is to examine the criticism to see if there's any truth in it. Usually there is some truth to criticism, and if we can separate out the kernel of truth from the emotional baggage associated with it, we could often learn something useful. For example, when my first book on ADD was published, one reviewer wrote a scathing and sarcastic commentary on it. While much of the commentary was off base or factually inaccurate, he did point out one real deficiency. My premise of Hunters and Farmers was based on anthropology, but I hadn't gotten the endorsement of any anthropologists or cited any anthropological texts in my bibliography. So, deciding that he had a point, I sought out people with the requisite knowledge of hunting and farming culture. I first found Will Kreinen, MD, who, while not an anthropologist, was one of the few medical doctors in the world to have spent years of his career as the physician to an indigenous hunting society, one of the last of the Native American tribes in Canada. Every year, he followed them with his small plane as they made their annual 1,000-mile trek with the caribou they hunted. He told me that when he first arrived, he found that the previous doctor had diagnosed 100% of their children with ADD and put the entire school on Ritalin. That, for me, was a pretty good validation of the hunter-farmer theory. Then I met cultural anthropologist Jay Fikes, PhD, who wrote the famous books debunking Carlos Castaneda. Dr. Fikes obtains his PhD by studying the few remaining Native American hunting societies of the American Southwest and northern Mexico. After reading my book, he wrote a ringing endorsement of it, saying that his experience taught him that hunting and agricultural societies were profoundly different, and that the individuals who make them up are profoundly different. There's a startlingly high percentage of what we would call ADD among some of the members of native hunting tribes. So that criticism of my book, as sarcastic and stinging as it was, made the book better. Anyhow, the book is ADD Success Stories, A Guide to Fulfillment for Families with Attention Deficit Disorder.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and I'm super pleased to have in the studio with me Professor Sophia McLennan, the director of the Center for Global Studies, the associate director of the School of International Affairs, professor of International Affairs and Comparative Literature at Pennsylvania State University, the author of Colbert's America, and the co-author of Is Satire Saving Our Nation, and a contributor to Salon. You're a little bit of an overachiever here, Sophia. Welcome. It's a super achiever.
Glad to be here.
And your website is Sophia, McClennan, SophiaMcLennan.com, and you can tweet her at McLennan65. So, political satire makes us smarter news consumers? How?
Well, one of the ways it does, it changes sort of how we consume news is that it uses irony. Right. And so one of the key pieces of satire is that you don't really say what you mean. So the brain has to process that. You say, if it's raining, you say, wow, what great weather. And I know you're being sarcastic, you're being ironic. And when I process that, my brain has to light up. It's very interesting to look at what happens to the mind when it processes satire. Meanwhile, most news is based on sort of a sensationalist, fear-based, emotive mode. And that is the reverse, right? It kind of shuts down your critical thinking. So in a news cycle and in a sort of news world like we're living in, satire is becoming incredibly important to help keep our minds nimble.
Yeah. And that idea of how we process things, there's a thing in NLP that you can't process a negative. That in order to process a negative, you first have to conceptualize the positive. And so if you say to somebody, don't run out in front of the traffic, the first thing they have to do is imagine running out in front of the traffic, which in many cases actually increases the probability that they will do it, if not now, at the future. In fact, it's taken as a command. And so there's like all these subtle levels of how we process communication. The other thing about comedy, I took a Bob McKee seminar years ago on screenwriting and novel writing. And he said the main thing about comedy is the moment of the unexpected moment that, I just got in from St. Louis, boy, are my legs, or boy, are my arms tired, that's, the breaking of expectation, as it were. How does that work?
Well, it's exactly what you just said, right? So it's forcing the brain to think outside of the literal meaning of what they thought you were going to say, right? Which was you flew in on a plane.
Right.
And so that helps you because you're filling in gaps in creative and rational and exciting ways. It does some fun things because you're enjoying yourself. And that's always good too for the brain because it's not fear-based. I just did a review of Bassem Youssef's new book, Revolution for Dummies. He was considered the Egyptian Jon Stewart. And one of the things that Bassem Youssef says is, when you're laughing, you can't be afraid.
Well, that's interesting.
And so this is taken from someone who had, gone through some extraordinary turmoil in Egypt and telling the public how his show, which reached about 40 million viewers, helped the public sort of navigate what was happening politically, right?
Now, there's a story that I learned in high school, which was a long time ago, that I don't to this day know if it was apocryphal or not, but it was about court jesters. And the story was that in kingdoms of old, that nobody wanted to contradict the king and nobody wanted to tell the king the truth, but somebody had to be able to, and the kings or queens, more typically kings, realized this. And so they would designate one person or one small group of people who could say literally anything and not lose their heads. And they were referred to as the jesters, so that whatever they said could be taken seriously or not at the choice of the king. And that this was sort of an origin point for a lot of what we call comedy and satire now, at least as a structural component of our culture. Is that stuff true?
It's absolutely true. And one of the sort of fascinating things, if you're a satire geek like I am, is that you find that satire emerges in moments of crisis. So when there is sort of an authoritarian crisis, when there's political breakdown, satire emerges in great force. And that's one of the reasons why we have so much of it today. One of the measures of the sort of strength of a leader is whether or not a leader will be able to handle comedy and satire. And so when Donald Trump started having hissy fits about Alec Baldwin's impersonation on SNL, it was interesting and it was historic because in the past, there's an interesting history of impersonations and how presidents have handled the jokes, right? You might remember Chevy Chase impersonating Gerald Ford and always walking into stuff.
I remember well.
And often the presidents say, hey, that's pretty funny. You know, you did a good job, right? Certainly Obama had to handle quite a bit of it. The fact that Trump seems to be so thin-skinned has been also a sign in the comedy world, right? That there is a line and he's not comfortable with it.
Well, and not just there is a line, but there's also almost a metric of insanity is not the right word, tyranny. I mean, it was in 1933, I'm pretty sure. It's been a while since I read Shearer's book, but I've been rereading it, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, that Hitler started executing comedians in the 30s and satirists. I mean, there's a point where that was just viewed as, you know, anti-regime propaganda. I haven't heard about anybody being executed, but, you know, there's a lot of ways to take people out in this society. Deny them employment, you know, go after them. Nixon went after people with the IRS, things like that. What should we be alarmed? Is there something we should be looking for here?
We do want to always keep an eye on it because it's directly related to our kind of free speech First Amendment rights. So we start to see that being encroached on in the world of comedy in the same ways that we see it in the news media. Remember that after 9/11, Bill Maher lost his job, right? Because
over a joke.
Over a joke. Well,
it was not. It was one of those things where
one of those moments.
He said the 9 and 11 guys were not cowards.
You could call them anything.
Yeah,
just not a coward.
Right. He said they were willing to give up their lives for what they believed in, or something, words to that effect, which arguably is true.
And he had to get off the air, right, and adjust. At the same time, we saw this happening with professors, with reporters, pressure, not getting your contract renewed, things like that. So it's important to understand that in our own history, we don't tend to execute the comedians. We just shut them down and silence them in different ways. So we want to keep an eye on that for sure.
So what is the state of things right now? It seems like the comedians, particularly as they're getting more and more political, Stephen Colbert and you know, a number of these guys who have, I've been just reading stories in the entertainment press about how the more political they go on their shows, mostly anti-Trump political, the better their ratings are. So it seems like it's a good environment right now for comedians.
That's true. And that's because we're living in this sort of corporate land, right? So as long as I'm doing well and I'm getting viewers, in fact, Colbert's got the highest ratings he's ever had, right, on The Late Show. Trevor Noah also is getting his highest ratings because he's sort of cutting his teeth and, you know, doing sharper satire. And so you're right. You hit the nail on the head. Well, how could Stewart and Colbert get away with some of the things they did? We go back and maybe some of your listeners remember the Smothers Brothers. I mean, they couldn't stay on.
Yeah,
right?
CBS kicked them off eventually
because they also had to get all of their bits pre-screened.
Right, and half of what they were doing, half of the anti-war stuff they were doing like it was buried 3 levels deep. You knew what they were saying, but they were not saying it.
Exactly. And so if you look at what Stewart and Colbert got away with during the George W. years, it's astonishing. So we have seen a kind of liberalization of what you can do in the land of comedy. And as long as you're not upsetting your sponsors and as long as you're continuing to get viewers, it seems to be holding. But again, the fact that Trump was saying SNL is bad, Baldwin is terrible, the idea that our own, at the time also, right, elected president would do that is interesting, right? Because it did suggest that he was hoping to put pressure on that show.
Well, it's also a dog whistle to the brown shirts, essentially, to his followers. You know, it's the level of attack that comes at you can get pretty amazing, and I mean, yeah, really amazing. And I'm hopeful that these guys can make it through. Any suggestions on using satire to diffuse intense political situations? You know, it's Thanksgiving dinner and crazy Uncle Ralph is sitting at the table talking about how much he loves Donald Trump. and you just want to say something.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a very interesting point because it turns out that satire goes over extremely badly when you're dealing with somebody who's sensitive, right? So one of the things that I'm actually currently doing research on is what I call blowback, right? When the joke, when you don't get the joke, when you feel like the butt of the joke, right? And so I'm trying to gather, we have the story, Bassem Youssef is exiled effectively from Egypt. I have a story of a Colombian satirist who was murdered. We have the Danish cartoonists that were also murdered. I mean, when does it cross that Charlie Hebdo, right? What happens when people become viciously angry because they feel mocked, right? So satire in its best form is encouraging critical thinking and not just making someone look stupid. That's not really it.
Right.
But again, if you feel like you've been humiliated, the anger that comes out of that can be far worse than other modes of communication. Right. So that's one of the things.
Humiliation and powerlessness are the two principal sources of rage, I believe.
Right. And so if you look at sort of the personality of somebody who's an authoritarian or even a terrorist, right, it's a fear-driven, paranoia-driven, anxiety-driven. So the satirist is the other side, right? The comedy, the laughing, the reason. And those parts of the brain don't usually talk to each other in the same way. So I can be an energizing sort of a collective resistance at the same time that I'm really angering those people that feel like they're the target.
Right. As long as they're not sitting around the Thanksgiving table with you.
Yeah. I mean, mostly I think you should talk about the weather at Thanksgiving.
That's wise advice. So political satire, the article, Why Political Satire Makes Us Smarter News Consumers, that was published where?
That was on Vox. This Vox video.
VOX.
Yeah.
VOX, not FR. Yeah, there we go. Professor Sophia McLennan, Director of the Center for Global Studies, Associate Director of the School for International Affairs. And you can, her website's sophiamclennan.com. You can tweet her at McLennan65. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more news of the day and your calls right after this. This woman is saying some really cool stuff. Muscato, Danielle Moscato. She says, this is to Donald Trump in response to his tweeting about Saturday Night Live, right? She said, do you know how many children went to bed tonight without enough food to eat? Do you even care? What is wrong with you? No, of course you don't know these things. You don't even know what a blind trust is, and you call yourself a businessman. You're pathetic. You ran for president for attention. You're a fake, a fraud. You never wanted to win anyway. We can all see it. You're not fooling anyone. You're scared and overwhelmed, and you have absolutely no idea what you're doing, and it shows. You think you're all that we're all too polite, too aghast to call you out. I see through you, Donnie. I'm calling you out. You're a joke. With every fiber of my being, I'm disgusted by you. And you know what the real secret is? You're disgusted by you, too, she's saying to Donald Trump. That's why you surround yourself with gold and beautiful women that you objectify. You know you're a loser, so you try to make yourself feel better, feel successful, authoritative with things, money. You're an imposter. You're a fraud. I'm ashamed of you. The world is ashamed. You spout nonsense. Millions of illegal voters, even you don't believe it. It's absurd. You think we're stupid? You think we don't know what you're doing? Trying to control the narrative, get your followers to distrust the media, the polls, news reporters, so that they must turn to you for what's true, what's real? There's a name for that. It's called propaganda. We know what you're doing. We will not allow you to suppress votes with this nonsense. We will not allow you to trample our civil rights. We will not allow you to destroy the progress we've made. We will resist. I call upon progressives, Democrats, independents, and Republicans to resist, #resist fascism, resist Donald Trump, resist crony capitalism, resist hypocrisy. When Donald Trump lies, acknowledge and call it out as propaganda. When he tests boundaries, acknowledge and call it out as fascism. Resist. We cannot wait and see. Real Donald Trump is telling us here and now what he's going to do. Believe him. Millions of illegal votes is not a claim about reality, despite what Donald Trump's pretense. It is a warning, a threat. Pay attention. Resist. Donald Trump is telling us he'll suppress our votes. Our democracy is at stake. We cannot wait, let him enact policy, then whine. We must resist. Donald Trump tweets so that we forget that his kids will run a company in a so-called blind trust while sitting in on diplomatic meetings. Trump tweets so we forget that he's stacking his cabinets with the very same people he proposed to remove from his influence. Trump tweets so we ignore that he's clueless at governance. The more outrageous his tweets, the harder it is for us to keep up. We see you, Donald. We know exactly what you're doing. It's not working on us. You're a disgrace and you should be ashamed. The next 4 years will be brutal for me and my fellow civil rights activists. Not all of us will survive, but we will resist. We will resist Donald Trump till racist police are imprisoned. We will resist till full equality for women. We will resist. We are ready. We will resist until abortion is accessible to everyone who needs it, until LGBTQ are safe and healthy, until people of color are safe. Donald Trump, you can fight us on it, and you will, but you will lose because history is on our side. We may not live to see it, but we know we will win. We will fight you every step, so be ready. You can't stop progress no matter how hard you try. I hear in her voice the echo of Sophie Scholl, who, along with her brother, started in Nazi Germany in the 40s, the White Rose Society, which was the resistance movement against Hitler, the student resistance movement against Hitler.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
On Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here
on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you
24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Boy, what a fascinating day. Stephanie in Winterville, Georgia, you had some thoughts on political satire?
I really enjoyed that discussion. I'm a big fan of listening to satire, but it does occur to me sometimes what she said about if you're dealing with people who are sensitive, it doesn't always go over that well.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, as a feminist, and this being Sexual Assault Awareness Month, I would love to figure out ways to critique rape and male violence against women, but these topics they don't lend themselves to comedy very easily.
Yeah.
So I struggle with that. Sometimes I think political satire is a mode of critique that's more easily available to people who haven't been harmed or who aren't emotionally wounded by something really dark.
But yeah, we don't make jokes about the Holocaust. They're just things you don't make jokes about. And or rape, there shouldn't be making.
Yeah, but if that kind of, I wish I could come up with some kind of satirical way to, in light of that. I was listening to in the break that you were reading that speech by Danielle Moscato, and I can't help but promote to you. There is a woman named Magdalene Burns. She's actually from the UK, and she does fantastic political, feminist satire, some of it around trans ideology, because I don't know if you're aware, but that Danielle Moscato actually has a beard and is bald and just reads very male. Like he doesn't read as female at all.
Okay. All right.
And so for the pronoun to be she and to speak on behalf of women, it's when I try to do this, you see, it comes off very emotional because I'm not a great satirist. But Magdalene Burns, she has some great videos on YouTube that are kind of like taking the Mickey out of that whole.
Okay, I'll have to look that up. I didn't hear the rant that we played during the break because I wasn't in the studio. I was saying goodbye to Sophia, and so if I seem like I'm not sure what you're talking about, that's because I didn't hear my own rant. It was, it's from a previous show that we plugged in there. But I get your point, Stephanie, and yeah, this is, how do you do satire? That would be a great question to ask Sophia if she were still here. How do you do satire with stuff that's really, really, really dark? Stephanie, thank you for the call. And we'll be right back. It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back with more of the news of the day. And scientists say something is very wrong with the tomato. And your calls.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Yes, giant bombs, tomatoes, and your calls right after this.
Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. We're reading today from my newest book, Adult ADHD. The first edition, or the first draft or version of which I actually wrote some 20 years ago, but it's we've updated it and reissued it, and I think you'll find it really interesting. This is from the introduction. There's a substantial subpopulation of the world that has a common and somewhat consistent set of personality characteristics. These traits have, for many people, led to difficulties in school, relationships, and work, and are collectively known among psychologists and psychiatrists as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. When researching this subject, I was struck by the number of ADHD adults I met and interviewed who'd chosen to become entrepreneurs, to strike out on their own, to forge their own unique lifestyles and businesses independent of others. Most often, these people are involved in an ever-changing life, often starting many businesses or regularly leading their existing companies in new directions. They thrive on stimulation and living on the edge. One biography of Ben Franklin asserts that he was America and possibly the world's first real entrepreneur, because rather than simply learning a trade and opening a lifelong business, he learned dozens of trades and created more than 30 businesses, as well as social and governmental institutions, the post office, libraries, all kinds of things Ben Franklin created for this country. This creation of something new over and over again is the core of entrepreneurship, whether you're a company owner or an entrepreneur within a company where your job constantly involves new projects or change. When writing an earlier book, Attention Deficit Disorder: A Different Perception, I heard from a psychologist who specializes in ADHD that perhaps as many as half of all entrepreneurs have ADHD. Now, a few years later, and after conversations with thousands of entrepreneurs around the country, I've come to the conclusion that nearly all entrepreneurs have ADHD to one extent or another. And I would add probably the vast majority of salespeople as well. I'm not speaking here of the fellow who carefully invests his money in a corner dry cleaning shop, runs his own business on that corner for 25 years to finally retire comfortably. While that person may meet some definitions of entrepreneurship, I'd rather refer to him as an independent small business person. Such people constitute an important and stable core of the business life of their community and of this country. Instead, I'm speaking here of those individuals who create or participate in dynamic, thriving, ever-growing, ever-changing companies. I'm speaking of the ones who take chances, who experiment. Henry Ford, who had several bankruptcies before he hit on a formula that worked. Or Thomas Edison, who tried thousands of different variations before he could get a working light bulb. These people's lives are often littered with failures, but their successes have given a spark of vitality and enterprise to America and made our country, particularly in its early days, unique in the world. They continue to bring us innovation and change that give great hope and promise for the future of our nation and the world. Some have applied their entrepreneurial characteristics to become great leaders. John F. Kennedy and Winston Churchill, for example, stand out. Others have created inventions, businesses, social institutions, and art that have changed the world. This book is about people who have overcome their challenges and in many cases actually used aspects of their ADHD to achieve prosperity or victory, and for those who would seek to emulate them. This book is for those who are willing to take chances, to forge a new niche in this business, social, cultural, political, or art worlds, or to create something new, and how to do that successfully. In the writing of this book, I've interviewed many people in the business world, including some of America's greatest. Few would want to jump up and raise their hands and say, yes, I have something that psychiatrists call a disorder. Nonetheless, all were, to my mind, hunters, my term for people with attention deficit hyperactivity disorders described in this book, to one extent or another. They shared stories of their successes and failures from childhood through advanced age that were remarkably similar. From these stories and my own successes and failures as a business person and entrepreneur, I've assembled a collection of specific tools and techniques for people with ADHD to achieve success in the business world. And then, we get into chapter 1, the nature of ADHD. We all experience a spectrum of levels of states of consciousness as we go through moment to moment on daily life. On one end of the spectrum is the very open, distractible state that we experience when driving or walking on a busy street, noticing all the events around us, alert to everything in our environment. At the other end of the spectrum are the tightly focused states of consciousness in which we're so intent on the book we're reading or the conversation we're having that the ticking of the clock in the room or the drone of traffic outside ceases to exist. When in a normal and relaxed state of consciousness, most people fall into a place somewhere between these two extremes of open and focused. They shift from open to focused and back with relative ease. It's difficult for the average person, however, to maintain either an extremely focused or an extremely open state of consciousness for hours at a time without such things as meditation training or the use of drugs like caffeine. The natural tendency is to snap back to the center line between the two states, which is to have a little bit of both. Some people, however, have an off-center baseline state of consciousness as their norm. Estimates vary between experts and researchers, but these people may represent as few as 10 or as much as 40% of the population. And this is the beginning of that difference that makes for ADHD and how it can be a tool, a useful thing, something that can actually help people succeed in the world. So this is our book report, our book reading today from my book, Adult ADHD, How to Succeed as a Hunter in a Farmer's World.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This whole Steve Bannon thing, I think, is absolutely fascinating. We're seeing now Donald Trump coming out is 3 times in the last 4 days saying basically, I'm not Steve Bannon's puppet. I was me before Steve Bannon came along. Steve Bannon's just a guy who works for me. Don't pay any attention to that Saturday Night Live skit where, Bannon comes in as the Grim Reaper and I have to sit in the little kids table. But at a certain level, speaking of satire, it's easy to make fun of. But I think that what's actually going on here, it could be, there's a lot of people theorizing about this. It could be that Donald Trump is dialing back Bannon's power and prestige, in part because Trump feels like Bannon has overshadowed him, which is something you don't want to have happen if you're a president, generally speaking. You want to be the guy who's got the political power. And I've noticed Joe Scarborough, for weeks has been pounding on Bannon about this. But my theory on this is slightly different. Steve Bannon was the guy. Steve Bannon read The Fourth Turning, right? And I realize there's a whole bunch of people out there who think, having read The Fourth Turning is like, oh my God, that's a terrible thing. I think it's actually a good thing. I read The Fourth Turning. I've shared The Fourth Turning on this program with you. I've had Neil Howe on this program, the co-author of the book. His partner, Strauss, is dead. We've talked about it many times over the years. It was a decade ago that I read the book, or more.
And it's a remarkable book. And Bannon is basically saying we're at that point in history where a war could happen really, really easily, and we don't want to be in the middle of it. We don't want it to be our war. And we don't want to be the ones who accidentally cause it. And, you know, I mean, these are my words, not Steve Bannon's, but, you know, I've read enough of his stuff and read about his positions that I think that that's kind of a reasonable characterization of it. And up until last week, Donald Trump was holding to that position. He campaigned on that position. You know, I'm not going to go into war in Syria. I'm not going to go, you know, the Iraq war was stupid. You know, we're going to get out of Afghanistan. We're going to get out of the Middle East. It's not the wars that we should be fighting. We shouldn't, you know, we shouldn't have taken out Gaddafi. It just created chaos in Libya. You know, we shouldn't try and take out Assad. And those positions were the Bannon positions that Trump adopted that were widely applauded on the campaign trail and that differentiated him from people like John McCain and Lindsey Graham, who never saw a war that they didn't love. But then Donald Trump fires some cruise missiles, apparently at the urging of his daughter, into Syria. For the first time, actually, the United States, I mean, this was a seminal moment, because this was the first time that we actually attacked the Syrian government. Up until that point, we've got 1,000 or more troops on the ground in Syria, and we have for months. We've got, you know, aircraft flying over Syria. We're lobbing missiles and artillery into Syria. We actually have troops on the ground in Syria. And up until last weekend, we had never attacked anybody in Syria that wasn't ISIS or ISIS-associated or al-Qaeda-associated. And so the government of Syria was saying, okay, you got 1,000 soldiers here, big deal. You're, you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. You fight ISIS, we all fight ISIS together. But when Trump threw those missiles at a Syrian airbase, even though it was, you know, largely symbolic, oh, you know, don't hit the runway, that kind of stuff. And you know, whether he did it because his daughter said, you know, hey, look at these terrible pictures of these little kids, or because he was watching Fox News and they were all cranked on it, or whether he did it because he thought that this will make President Xi think that I might be crazy enough to do the same thing to North Korea, and he'll help me out with Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-un, thank you. Whatever it may be, what he discovered after he threw those Tomahawk missiles was that his popularity went up. I mean, it went up big and it went up fast. Because Americans just love a war, right? We love that tough guy. And so now Trump is going, hey, you know, this commander-in-chief thing, this is pretty cool. He got the bug. You know, the only, you know, since basically the Vietnam War, the only president who didn't have a war while he was president was Jimmy Carter. Even a little war, you know, Reagan and Grenada, right? George Herbert Walker Bush and Iraq and Kuwait. Every president has to have their war. And my sense of this, and I hope I'm wrong, my sense of this is that Trump has been seduced, to use the phrase of James Madison. On April 20th in 1795, we were a republic. James Madison was, as I recall, in 1795, he would have been George Washington's Secretary of State. Or was Jefferson Secretary of State? Oh, whatever. Anyhow, James Madison was it. He wrote this on April 20th, 1795. Of all the enemies of true liberty, war is the most to be dreaded because it comprises and develops the germ of every other enemy of liberty. War is the parent of armies. From these proceed debt and taxes, and armies and debts and taxes are the known instruments for bringing the many under the dominion of the few. In war, too, the discretionary power of the president is extended. His influence in dealing out offices, honors, and emoluments is multiplied, and all the means of seducing the minds are added to those of subduing the force of the people. The same malignant aspect in republicanism, and he's talking about our form of government, not a party, may be traced in the inequality of fortunes and the opportunities of fraud that grow out of a state of war, and in the degeneracy of manners and of morals engendered in both. No nation can preserve its freedom in the midst of continual warfare. War is, in fact, the true nurse of executive aggrandizement. In war, a physical force is to be created, and it is the executive will which is to direct it. In war, the public treasuries are to be unlocked, and it is the executive hand which is to dispense them. By executive, we're talking the president, the executive branch of government. In war, the honors and emoluments of office are to be multiplied, and it is the executive patronage under which they are to be enjoyed, and it is the executive brow they are to encircle. The strongest passions and most dangerous weaknesses of the human breast, ambition, avarice, vanity, the honorable or venal love of fame, are all in conspiracy in war against the desire and duty of peace. This is a letter James Madison wrote. It's from his little booklet, Political Observations, April 20, 1795, and I think that that's where we are. Stanley in Missoula, Montana. Hey, Stanley, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. I hope you're feeling better with your back.
Oh, yeah, it's the surgery fixed me. I'm fine.
Okay, I just called my senators about the bombing, and I am just appalled about what's going on. We have killed countless of civilians in Iraq, and there's no coverage of the civilians that have died.
Yeah, we just did a friendly fire thing in either Iraq or Syria. We killed 18 of our people aligned with us. Also, I mean, it's just this is the stuff that happens in war, and yeah, he was bombing ISIS, but I don't know enough about this particular bombing in Afghanistan to critique it, criticize it, or praise it for that matter. But it just, the echoes of James Madison are so loud here, Stanley. They're just so loud. Thanks so much for the call. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with your calls right after. And welcome back. Donna in San Diego. Hey, Donna, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching Free Speech. Donna? Oh, Donna's
Hello?
gone. Hey, Donna,
Yeah?
You're on the air.
I am? Okay. Thank you, Tom. I wanted to say a few things about, I've been listening all along, and I started out by wanting to comment about the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm from San Diego, so I have some inside information about what's happening down here about the wall, which is not only the environmental problems, but the fact that the land is owned by private people who they're having difficulty. They have to actually try to buy the land, and there's going to be an added expense, and the people aren't willing to sell the land.
Right, which means that they take it through eminent domain, yeah.
Yeah, and what they're finding out here is that I happen to know the contractors that are involved, and it's become so immeasurably difficult to try to even approach this problem that they're all discouraged about the wall.
Interesting.
But aside from that, can I just say one other thing? Because if I was listening, has anyone, I look at his personality, Donald Trump, and I think he is ADD himself.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all if he was if he had attention deficit disorder.
So he's a person who's very sensitive, who can't take any criticism. And I think that because his personality he almost has a personality blindness because of what you were talking about. He needs to succeed so desperately that he what's the word? He wants to be in the limelight. He wants to be the winner.
He overcompensates.
But yet he can hyperfocus or not focus, and so the people around him can direct him in very dynamic ways to do things if they know how to talk to somebody who's ADHD.
Well, I think that his ADHD is more like a temperament thing. It's more like a personality characteristic. I think the psychopathology that drives him and that is being used to manipulate him is his narcissism, his fundamental insecurity.
Learned that because he, in his early years, he was not succeeding. But what
he was not loved.
It makes him so naive. I know everyone wanted to believe in him because he built his persona to be successful, rich, and saying all these things like they're the truth. We're going to build a wall and the problem's so easy. But people believed in him, but really not knowing how totally naive he is. Right. And what we're seeing right now with the wall is going to be the result of that. He's going to do wonders, but he's unfortunately cannot.
My prediction, Donna, is that he's going to build a little bit of wall that looks really good, and he's going to do a photo op there. And as Vermont Senator George Aiken wisely advised Lyndon Johnson in 1967, he said, "Why don't you just declare victory and come home?" And Trump will say, "Ta-da! I built the wall." And people will go, "Oh, but there's still 1,000 miles that didn't." And he'll say, "That's enough. That's we've got." But we'll see. We'll see. I mean, on the other hand, you got a bunch of contractors who are going to get the money to build that wall, who are kicking money back to the Republican Party like there's no tomorrow. So that could screw things up too. Donna, thank you for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Jerry in Chicago. Hey, Jerry, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Great talking to you. Love the show.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Just fine, Jerry.
I'm on a speakerphone.
You're on a good one. What's on your mind?
Well, I wanted to talk to you about. I'm actually writing a political satire on the Bush administration right now.
Whoa.
And
on the Bush administration or on the Trump administration?
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, actually, I wrote one on the Bush. It was called Bushwhacked.
Okay.
During college, and I ended up getting an A+ on that. But,
great.
No, on the Trump administration, and hello?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to ask you. I actually sent you the first 2 chapters. I emailed them to you. And I know you probably get a lot of emails.
I almost certainly didn't get it, Jerry. Any email that comes into me that has any of about 30 political phrases in it that is not from somebody on my contact list automatically goes to my spam folder. It's not a way to communicate with me via email.
Okay.
But you can post things. You can post things on our daily blog on the homepage at thomhartmann.com. I read that.
Oh, okay.
Or you can drop into our chat room. I read the stuff in our chat room too.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm not, professional at this, but it is really good. And do you have any ideas where I could peddle that to?
I don't. I'm sorry. I really, first of all, if you're talking about writing a book and you're asking author advice here, the first piece of advice is finish the book. Because publishers are always, unless you've published books in the past, they've heard that song from so many people. Oh yeah, this is going to be a great book, but it's only a third done. Finish the book before you try to sell it. And then once you've got it finished, there are great resources. Writer's Digest magazine publishes an annual book, and it's like a 500-600 page book, which is a listing of all the publishers in America, what they buy, how they buy it, how to submit to them, who the editors are, what their addresses are, how to do these things. So I recommend you check that out. Jerry, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. I wish you the very best. Edward in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Edward, what's up?
You were talking about satire and the delicacy of issues like sexual harassment.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen the comedian that does Trump on Saturday Night Live?
That does what on Saturday Night Live?
That does Trump?
Oh, Alec Baldwin. Yeah.
Alec Baldwin. He did last Saturday night. He played O'Reilly.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, and he was making fun of sexual harassment. You're right. Well, actually, he was making fun of O'Reilly, but sexual harassment was the topic. Yeah.
Sexually harassing, some female reporter.
Right. Right.
But in a very, very subtle way, using code words. So.
Yeah.
I just would.
Go ahead, Edward.
I just wanted to, make people aware of that, and they can go to YouTube and catch it on the Saturday Night Live channel if they haven't seen that already.
Yeah, it was a hysterical routine, and you're absolutely right, Edward. Thanks for the call. Jonna in Little Rock, Washington. Am I saying your name right?
Hi, Tom. Yes, thank you. Not to travel all the way back to the very beginning of a fascinating 2 hours, but I wanted to return briefly to overbooking on airlines. Sure. It's on my mind since I'm traveling, and I'm in Illinois at this point, and incidentally could not change my travel dates without paying more than the ticket was worth, which is interesting.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a question. I wanted to question an assumption. Why is overbooking okay in the first place? I haven't heard anyone on television or radio mention that question. Theater seats or cruise seats that can routinely cost as much as airline tickets, people also routinely fail to show up for. But I have not seen anybody drag down the aisle of a theater or a cruise ship, and I think people would be outraged if that happened.
Right.
I don't know why it's okay for airlines to get away with this, especially since most fares are non-refundable in the first place.
Exactly. So if you miss your flight, you've simply lost the money and you have to buy a new ticket anyway. So the airline is double dipping. They're taking the money from the person who got stuck in security for 2 hours, and they're taking the money from the person that they second time sold the seat to. You're right, John.
Exactly. And usually when people are traveling, it's for a vital reason. I'm here for a healthcare crisis. People are not traveling. Flying is not fun. So we don't travel. We don't fly for fun. If we're going somewhere, as opposed to the theater where this does not happen, this is a vital reason we're traveling, and they do not have this right in the first place.
Yep, I agree. And I know it well. And in fact, just FYI, not just to you, Jonna, but to everybody, we are working on a new documentary on climate change. And Louise and I are going to another country. I'll tell the whole story of this next week when I get back. We're leaving at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. We'll be back Monday night to do some shooting, filming for this climate change documentary. So Alex is going to be filling in for me, Alex Lawson, tomorrow and Monday. But just an FYI, Jonna, thanks a lot for the call and appreciate it. Dave in Northampton, Mass. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hey, Tom, thanks again for your broadcast, sir. We can't talk about American satire without mentioning The Simpsons.
You're right.
30 years, political and social satire like a Dutch master.
And owned by Rupert Murdoch.
Yes. God forbid. The only thing decent about Fox is The Simpsons.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Dave, thanks a lot for the call. That was a great comment. Paul in Woodinville, Washington. Hey, Paul, last 2 minutes of the show are yours. What's up?
Tom, this business about Rex Tillerson and Donald Trump saying that U.S.-Russian relations are at an all-time low is the biggest bunch of BS I've ever heard. First of all, have you ever known Trump to fold and admit defeat so quickly and easily? I mean, if we were on the verge of nuclear war, he'd be saying relationships are fantastic.
Yeah.
This is all staged, a la professional wrestling, this antagonism.
Oh, this is, in my opinion, this is his way of saying that he was not, that the Russians didn't help him become president, basically.
Well, yeah, of course. But let's take him at face value. How is it that you send your Secretary of State into a room with the head of state of another country and things come out, and things are worse?
Right.
Apparently he's not practicing great negotiation or the art of the deal. Right. Things get worse when people don't talk. They don't get worse when parties sit down to talk. They come to agreements and understandings, and they calm whatever tensions might be. By the way, why should there have been tensions? I mean, where did things go? It's not over this phony Tomahawk missile attack that was blew up a couple of corrugated metal buildings in the middle of the desert. They blew up more things when they built the damn airport than they did there.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, come on. This is ridiculous. And here's the other thing is, what are other countries supposed? If they're supposed to take this at face value and take it seriously, this is playing with fire. You cannot mess around like this with foreign policy and send messages that are not true and not authentic to make yourself look good. It's just too dangerous.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And this is my, back to my James Madison thing. This is so seductive, the use of military force and the use of power like this, the use of killing, basically. It's so seductive. And Donald Trump has now, been morphed into essentially a killer president. And not a good thing. Paul, always nice to hear from you. Thanks so much for the call. And thank you all for being with us today. And I'll be back, as I said, on Tuesday. Alex Lawson will be here, live shows tomorrow and Monday. And in the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us, including you, to get out there and get active. Tag You're It.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com.